Tonight, you move quietly through a different layer of the wizarding world, one that exists beneath ordinary spells and familiar lessons. Dark magic does not begin with power, but with intention, shaped slowly through thought and choice. At first, the changes are small, almost unnoticeable, woven into moments of control, curiosity, and quiet ambition. Over time, these moments gather, forming patterns that deepen with each step forward. As you settle into stillness, allow this path to unfold gently, moving from the simplest shifts in magic to the places where it can no longer be undone, and everything begins to change. Magic in the wizarding world is often described as a force that responds to will. It does not carry intent on its own, nor does it choose how it is used. Instead, it reflects the thoughts and decisions of the witch or wizard guiding it. In its simplest form, magic is neutral. It can lift objects, mend broken things, or illuminate dark spaces. These acts carry no inherent harm. They are shaped only by purpose and by the quiet direction of the mind behind the wand. At Hogwarts, young students are introduced to this idea early, though not always in direct terms. Their first spells are small and controlled, designed to teach precision rather than power. A feather rises from a desk. A matchstick becomes a needle. Light appears at the tip of a wand. Each action is careful, contained within the boundaries of the classroom. The lessons focus on movement, pronunciation, and concentration. In these early stages, magic is treated as a skill to be refined, not a force to be questioned. Yet even within these controlled environments, intention begins to take shape. Two students may cast the same spell, yet the feeling behind it may differ. One may act with patience, following instruction exactly. Another may rush, driven by frustration or competition. The spell itself may succeed or fail in similar ways, but the experience of casting it leaves a different impression. Over time, these small differences begin to accumulate. The wizarding world recognizes categories of magic, though the boundaries between them are not always clear. Charms are often seen as constructive, altering the properties of objects without changing their fundamental nature. Transfiguration reshapes matter itself, demanding a deeper level of focus and understanding. Defensive magic exists to protect, to shield against harm. These categories are taught as separate disciplines, each with its own rules and methods. But beneath them all lies the same principle: magic follows intent. Dark magic is not introduced as a separate subject at first. Instead, it exists as a contrast, something implied rather than fully explained. Students are warned against certain spells without always being told why. They learn that some magic is restricted, not because it is difficult, but because it carries consequences that extend beyond the immediate effect. The idea is planted quietly, without urgency. There are forms of magic that should not be used. This distinction becomes clearer over time. As students progress, they encounter terms like jinx, hex, and curse. These words suggest increasing levels of harm, but they do not always define it precisely. A jinx may cause minor inconvenience, a momentary disruption. A hex may introduce discomfort or embarrassment. A curse, however, implies something deeper, something intended to cause lasting damage. These classifications provide structure, but they do not fully capture the role of intention. A spell designed to trip someone may seem harmless in isolation. It may even be treated as a joke among students, but when cast with the desire to humiliate or dominate, its nature begins to shift. The same words, the same wand movement, produce a different kind of effect when shaped by a different state of mind. This is where the earliest form of dark magic begins, not in the spell itself, but in the purpose behind it. In everyday life, witches and wizards rely on magic for convenience and efficiency. Objects are moved without touch, doors open at a gesture. Tasks that would take hours by ordinary means are completed in moments. These uses of magic are so common that they fade into the background. They are not questioned because they do not disrupt the balance between individuals. They serve rather than control. The shift occurs when magic is used not to assist, but to influence another person directly. Even in small ways, this introduces a different dynamic, a charm that alters perception, a spell that restricts movement, a jinx that disrupts focus. These acts place one person's will over another's experience. At first, the effects are temporary, easily reversed. They leave little trace once they fade, but the act itself leaves something behind. This is why intention holds such importance in magical theory. It is not simply a matter of success or failure. A spell cast without focus may falter, producing weak or unpredictable results. A spell cast with clarity and determination will often succeed, but when that clarity is directed toward harm, the magic responds accordingly. It becomes more precise, more effective, and more aligned with the caster's underlying purpose. Professors at Hogwarts emphasize discipline for this reason. Control is taught not only to ensure safety, but to shape the mindset of the student. Without discipline, magic can become reactive, driven by emotion rather than thought. Moments of anger may lead to unintended consequences. A careless gesture, fueled by frustration, can produce effects that linger longer than expected. These incidents are treated as lessons, reminders of the connection between feeling and outcome. Over time, students learn to separate impulse from action. They are encouraged to pause, to consider the effect of their spells before casting them. This practice reinforces the idea that magic is not separate from the self, it is an extension of it. Every spell carries a trace of the caster's intent, whether acknowledged or not. The earliest stage of dark magic does not appear as something dramatic or unmistakable. It emerges gradually, through repeated choices that place control above cooperation. A student who consistently uses magic to gain advantage over others begins to shape their relationship with it. What was once a tool becomes a means of influence. The boundary between harmless use and harmful intent becomes less distinct. This stage is often overlooked because it does not produce immediate consequences. There is no visible transformation, no clear signal that something has changed. The magic remains familiar, the environment unchanged. Yet beneath the surface, a pattern begins to form. Each act reinforces the idea that magic can be used to shape others according to one's will. In the wider wizarding world, these patterns extend beyond the classroom. Social interactions, professional settings, and even casual encounters can involve subtle uses of magic. A charm to persuade, a spell to distract, a jinx to inconvenience. These actions may seem insignificant in isolation, but they reflect the same underlying principle. Magic is being used to influence rather than to assist. This is the foundation upon which darker forms of magic are built, not a single decision, but a series of small ones. Each choice moves slightly further from neutrality, aligning magic more closely with personal desire. The shift is gradual, almost unnoticeable at first, but as it continues, it creates a pathway, one that leads deeper into forms of magic where intention becomes more defined and the consequences more lasting. At this early level, the process remains quiet. There are no clear boundaries being crossed, no rules explicitly broken. The magic itself appears unchanged. Yet the way it is used begins to reflect something more deliberate. Control becomes a goal, not just an outcome. And in that subtle change, the first step into darker territory has already been taken. As students spend more time within the structured environment of magical education, they begin to encounter forms of magic that exist just beyond simple utility. These are not the foundational spells used to lift objects or light dark corridors. They are smaller, sharper applications of magic, often introduced quietly through observation rather than formal instruction. Among these are jinxes and hexes, spells designed not to assist, but to disrupt. At first, these forms of magic appear almost playful. A jinx may cause a brief stumble, a momentary loss of balance, or a harmless physical reaction that fades quickly. Within the halls of Hogwarts, such spells often circulate informally among students, passed along through whispered conversations, or demonstrated in moments of curiosity. They are rarely taught directly in early lessons, yet they become familiar through repeated exposure. The Bat Bogey Hex is one example often mentioned among students. Its effect is unpleasant, transforming the target's mucus into aggressive, winged creatures that attack the face. While the spell does not cause lasting physical harm, it produces discomfort and embarrassment. Its use is often framed as defensive or retaliatory, yet the line between defense and provocation is not always clearly defined. A spell cast in response to irritation may appear justified in the moment, but it still carries the intent to harm, however briefly. This is where the nature of these spells begins to shift. They are not inherently destructive, nor are they irreversible. Their effects fade, and in many cases, they can be countered with relative ease. Because of this, they are often dismissed as minor, yet their design serves a different purpose from the spells taught in formal classrooms. They exist to impose discomfort, to interrupt, to assert a moment of control over another person's experience. Within student life, such magic can become part of social interaction. Rivalries between houses, competition within classes, and personal disagreements all create opportunities for these spells to be used. A jinx cast across a corridor, a hex whispered under one's breath, a brief moment of disruption during a lesson. These actions are often fleeting, but they leave an impression. They establish patterns of behavior, shaping how individuals relate to one another through magic. The environment itself does not always discourage this behavior with urgency. Minor infractions may result in detention or the loss of house points, but they are rarely treated as serious offenses. This lack of immediate consequence allows the practice to continue, reinforcing the idea that such magic exists within acceptable boundaries. Students learn, sometimes without being told directly, that certain forms of harm are tolerated as long as they remain limited in scope. Over time, familiarity with these spells leads to refinement. What begins as experimentation becomes practiced skill. The casting becomes more precise, the timing more deliberate. Students learn not only how to perform these spells, but when to use them for maximum effect. This awareness introduces a new layer of intention. The magic is no longer reactive, it becomes calculated. This shift is subtle but significant. A spell used impulsively in a moment of frustration carries a different weight than one used with forethought. When a student begins to anticipate situations where a jinx or hex might provide advantage, the role of magic changes. It is no longer simply a response to circumstance. It becomes a tool for shaping outcomes. In some cases, this behavior is reinforced by social dynamics. Certain spells gain reputations, becoming associated with confidence or dominance. Students who use them effectively may be perceived as skilled or assertive. These interactions create an environment where the use of minor harmful magic becomes part of an unspoken system of influence. The distinction between harmless and harmful becomes less clear in these moments. A hex that causes discomfort may seem insignificant compared to more severe forms of magic, yet it still alters another person's experience without consent. It introduces imbalance, however temporary. Repeated over time, these small imbalances accumulate, shaping relationships and reinforcing patterns of control. Even outside of direct conflict, such spells may be used casually. A moment of boredom, a desire for amusement, or simple curiosity can lead to experimentation. In these instances, the intent may not be rooted in anger or hostility, yet the effect remains the same. Magic is used to affect another person, not for necessity, but for personal satisfaction. This is where normalization begins to take hold. When these actions are repeated without significant consequence, they become integrated into daily life. The initial hesitation fades. What once felt uncertain becomes routine. The boundary between acceptable and unacceptable use of magic shifts, not through formal change, but through repeated behavior. The wizarding world, in its broader context, reflects this same pattern. While laws exist to regulate more severe forms of magic, minor spells often fall outside strict enforcement. Social norms take precedence, and these norms vary depending on environment and upbringing. In some circles, the use of jinxes and hexes may be discouraged. In others, they may be seen as a natural part of magical interaction. This variation reinforces the idea that intention is shaped not only by the individual, but by the surrounding culture. A student raised in an environment where such magic is common may adopt it without question. Another, unfamiliar with its use, may approach it with hesitation. Over time, these differences influence how magic is perceived and applied. As students continue to develop their abilities, the presence of these spells remains constant. They serve as a bridge between neutral magic and more advanced forms of harm. Their simplicity makes them accessible, while their effects introduce the concept of influence over others. Each use, however minor, contributes to an evolving understanding of what magic can do. This stage does not yet involve irreversible actions or deeply transformative spells. The magic remains contained, its consequences limited, yet it establishes a foundation. It introduces the idea that magic can be used not just to interact with the world, but to shape the experiences of others within it. In this way, the earliest forms of harmful magic become more than isolated incidents. They form a pattern, one that gradually shifts the relationship between caster and subject. Control becomes familiar, influence becomes practiced, and without a clear boundary to mark the change, the transition into deeper forms of dark magic begins to feel less like a step and more like a continuation. Magic does not remain separate from emotion. It responds to it, often in ways that are not fully understood, especially in the early stages of a witch or wizard's life. Before formal training begins, many magical children experience moments where their abilities surface without intention. These moments are not guided by knowledge or discipline. They are shaped by feeling, rising suddenly in response to fear, anger, or distress. A glass may shatter without being touched. An object may move across a room. In some cases, a person may be affected directly, though the cause is not immediately clear. These events are rarely controlled. They happen quickly, often without warning, and just as quickly, they fade. For those who witness them, they can seem strange or unsettling. For the one who caused them, they are often confusing, leaving behind a sense that something has occurred without a clear explanation. Within the wizarding world, these moments are recognized as signs of developing magic. They are not treated as wrongdoing, but as a natural part of growth. Letters of acceptance arrive, offering structure and guidance. The expectation is that, with proper education, these uncontrolled expressions will become stable, shaped by knowledge and practice. The assumption is that once a student learns control, these emotional surges will no longer dictate the outcome of their magic. Yet the connection between emotion and magic does not disappear with training. It becomes less visible, more contained, but it remains present. Even the most carefully practiced spell carries a trace of the caster's internal state. A wand movement may be precise, the incantation clear, but the result can still vary depending on what lies beneath the surface. Moments of strong emotion can still influence magic in subtle ways. A spell cast in anger may strike with more force than intended, A charm performed with hesitation may falter, its effect incomplete. Fear can disrupt concentration, causing magic to behave unpredictably. These variations are often attributed to lack of focus, but they reflect something deeper. Magic is not only a skill, it is a reflection. This becomes more apparent in situations where emotion is not controlled, but allowed to guide action. In a moment of frustration, a student may cast a jinx more sharply than intended. In a moment of embarrassment, a hex may be used not just to respond, but to deflect attention. These actions are not always premeditated. They arise quickly, shaped by feeling rather than thought. At this stage, the magic itself may still fall within the category of minor harm. Its effects remain temporary, its consequences limited, but the source of the action begins to shift. The spell is no longer simply a tool. It becomes an extension of the emotion that drives it. This creates a pattern where feeling and action become closely linked, each reinforcing the other. Over time, repeated experiences like this begin to shape a deeper relationship with magic. A student who frequently responds to anger with harmful spells may come to associate that emotion with power. The act of casting becomes a release, a way to resolve internal tension by directing it outward. In these moments, magic is no longer neutral. It becomes a response, shaped by the intensity of feeling. This pattern does not always develop consciously. It can form gradually, without deliberate intention. Each instance may seem isolated, a reaction to a specific situation, but as they accumulate, they create a consistent behavior. The individual begins to rely on magic not only for practical purposes, but as a means of managing emotion. Within Hogwarts, there are efforts to address this connection, though they are not always explicit. Students are encouraged to remain calm, to approach magic with clarity rather than impulse. Discipline is framed as a necessary skill, not only for safety, but for mastery. These teachings aim to separate emotion from action, to create distance between feeling and result. However, this separation is not always maintained. Outside of structured lessons, in moments of conflict or competition, emotional responses can override learned discipline. A disagreement between students may escalate quickly when magic is involved. Words may be replaced by spells, each action driven by a desire to assert control or defend pride. In these situations, the influence of emotion becomes more visible. This visibility, however, does not always lead to reflection. Incidents may be resolved, consequences assigned, and life continues. The underlying pattern remains, often unexamined. Without deliberate effort to understand the connection between emotion and magic, the behavior can persist, becoming more ingrained over time. There are also individuals who learn to harness this connection more deliberately. Rather than allowing emotion to disrupt their magic, they begin to channel it. Anger becomes focus, fear becomes urgency. These transformations can increase the effectiveness of certain spells, making them more precise or more forceful. This control over emotion does not remove its influence. It refines it. At this point, the boundary between control and reliance becomes less clear. Using emotion as a source of power can create a sense of dependency. The individual may begin to seek out situations that provoke strong feelings, knowing that these states enhance their magic. The connection between internal experience and external effect becomes a defining aspect of their practice. This is where the early stages of dark magic begin to take a more distinct form. The magic itself may not yet be classified as dark, but the way it is used begins to reflect darker patterns. Emotion is no longer something to be managed or set aside. It becomes a driving force, shaping both the choice of spells and the intention behind them. In the broader wizarding world, this relationship between emotion and magic is acknowledged in more advanced forms of spellcasting. Certain spells require specific emotional states to function. Without the correct feeling, they fail. This reinforces the idea that emotion is not separate from magic, but integral to it. When combined with harmful intent, this integration becomes more significant. At this level, the consequences remain contained. The spells used are still within the range of what can be reversed or healed. The individual retains the ability to choose differently, to redirect their approach. But the pattern has begun to form. Magic is no longer guided solely by thought. It is influenced, and at times directed, by feeling. This influence creates a pathway, one that leads toward deeper forms of magical practice. Each time emotion is allowed to shape action without reflection, the connection strengthens. The distinction between controlled casting and emotional response becomes less defined, and as that distinction fades, the transition into more deliberate and harmful uses of magic becomes easier to cross. In this way, the loss of control is not always sudden. It develops through repetition, through moments where feeling takes precedence over intention. The magic follows, responding as it always does, reflecting the state of the one who casts it. And in that reflection, the first signs of deeper transformation begin to appear. By the time these early patterns begin to settle, the use of magic has already shifted in quiet ways. What once required thought now happens more easily, guided by habit rather than reflection. A spell is chosen not only for what it does, but for how it feels to use. The connection between intention and action becomes more immediate, less examined, and more consistent over time. At this stage, the changes are not marked by visible transformation. The spells remain familiar, the environment remains the same, yet the purpose behind each action begins to follow a more defined path. Magic is no longer used only when necessary. It begins to appear in moments where it offers advantage, even when that advantage is small. A student may begin to anticipate situations before they occur, considering how magic might shape the outcome. A disagreement is no longer simply a conversation. It becomes an opportunity to assert control. A challenge in class is no longer only a test of knowledge. It becomes a moment to outpace others, to secure position through skill or disruption. These shifts are subtle, but they influence how magic is approached. Over time, the use of magic becomes more deliberate. Instead of reacting to events, the individual begins to guide them. A jinx is cast not in response, but in preparation. A hex is used not out of impulse, but with timing and awareness. The act of casting becomes part of a broader pattern, one that reflects a growing desire to shape surroundings rather than simply exist within them. This desire does not always present itself as something negative. It may be framed as confidence, as capability, or as the natural result of increased skill. The ability to influence events can feel like progress, especially in an environment where magical ability is valued. Yet, the underlying shift remains the same. Control becomes an objective, not just a possibility. With repetition, this objective begins to influence decision-making. Situations are approached with the expectation that magic will provide an advantage. Alternatives that do not involve magic may be overlooked or dismissed. The reliance grows gradually, supported by consistent results. Each successful use reinforces the pattern, making it more likely to continue. At the same time, awareness of boundaries begins to change. Early warnings about restricted spells or inappropriate use of magic may lose their weight. They become distant, part of formal instruction rather than immediate concern. The individual may begin to test these boundaries, not through large actions, but through small adjustments. A spell cast slightly outside its intended use, a charm applied in a way that was not explicitly taught. These actions do not always result in immediate consequences. When they succeed, they create a sense of expansion, as though the limits of magic are more flexible than previously understood. This perception encourages further exploration, each step moving slightly beyond the last. The process remains controlled, but it is no longer confined. In this environment, secrecy begins to play a role. Not all actions are shared openly. Certain spells are practiced away from observation, refined through repetition without guidance. This separation from structured learning allows for greater freedom, but it also removes the influence of correction. Without external input, the individual relies on personal judgment to determine what is acceptable. This reliance can create a shift in perspective. Instead of measuring actions against established rules, they are evaluated based on outcome. If a spell achieves its intended effect, it is seen as successful. The method becomes secondary. Over time, this way of thinking reduces the importance of limitation, focusing instead on effectiveness. The influence of peers and environment continues to shape this process. In some groups, the use of such magic may be encouraged, seen as a sign of strength or independence. In others, it may be discouraged, though not always consistently enforced. These varying responses contribute to a sense that boundaries are flexible, dependent on context rather than fixed principles. As the individual moves through these experiences, the relationship with magic becomes more personal. It is no longer simply a skill taught within the walls of a classroom. It becomes a means of expression, a way to interact with the world in ways that extend beyond ordinary behavior. This expansion brings with it a sense of autonomy, but also a gradual distancing from the original purpose of magical education. The early lessons focused on control, precision, and understanding. At this stage, those elements remain, but they are applied differently. Control is used not only to prevent error, but to direct outcomes. Precision is valued not only for accuracy, but for effectiveness in achieving specific goals. Understanding is shaped by experience rather than instruction, guided by what works rather than what is taught. This shift does not occur in isolation. It is supported by the accumulation of previous patterns, the familiarity with minor harmful spells, the influence of emotion on casting, and the normalization of subtle control all contribute to the current state. Each element builds upon the last, creating a foundation that supports further progression. There is still room for change at this level. The patterns are established, but not fixed. The individual retains the ability to reconsider, to return to earlier principles, to adjust their approach. The magic itself remains responsive, capable of reflecting different intentions if they are chosen. Nothing has yet become irreversible. However, the direction has begun to take shape. The repeated use of magic for control, the gradual expansion beyond taught boundaries, and the growing reliance on personal judgment all point toward a deeper engagement with forms of magic that extend further from neutrality. It continues through accumulation, each step reinforcing the next. In this way, the psychological beginning of darker practice is defined not by a single action, but by a series of consistent choices. Each choice may appear small, even reasonable within its context, yet, together, they create a shift in how magic is understood and used. The individual begins to see magic not only as a tool, but as a means of shaping others and the world around them. This perspective prepares the ground for what follows. As knowledge expands and new forms of magic become accessible, the established patterns guide how they are approached. Curiosity leads to exploration. Exploration leads to practice. And practice, shaped by intention, begins to move beyond the boundaries that once defined it. As students progress through their years at Hogwarts, the structure of learning begins to reveal areas that are not meant for open exploration. The library, expansive and carefully maintained, holds knowledge from many centuries. Most of it is accessible, arranged for study, and guided by instruction. Yet there are sections set apart, separated not only by physical boundaries, but by intent. These areas are not hidden entirely, but they are controlled, approached with caution rather than curiosity. The restricted section stands as one of these spaces. Its presence is known to students, though its contents are not openly discussed in detail. Access requires permission, often granted only under specific circumstances. The books within are not simply advanced. They are different in nature, containing forms of magic that extend beyond standard education. Some describe spells that alter the body or mind in ways that are difficult to reverse. Others record practices that draw upon forces not fully understood. The decision to restrict this knowledge, rather than remove it, reflects a broader principle within the wizarding world. Magic, even in its most dangerous forms, is preserved. It is studied, documented, and kept within reach, though not without limitation. This approach suggests that understanding is valued, even when the subject carries risk. At the same time, it acknowledges that exposure without preparation can lead to misuse. For many students, the restricted section represents something more than a collection of books. It becomes a symbol of what lies beyond the known boundaries of magic. The idea that there are spells and practices withheld from general study creates a quiet sense of curiosity. Questions form without clear answers. What is contained within those pages, and why is it set apart? This curiosity is not always driven by a desire for harm. In many cases, it begins as a natural extension of learning. A student who has mastered the basics may seek to understand what comes next. The absence of direct instruction creates a space where imagination fills the gap. The unknown becomes an area of interest, not because it is forbidden, but because it is unexplored. Over time, this interest can lead to attempts at access. A permission slip requested under the guidance of a professor. A book consulted briefly under supervision. In some cases, more indirect methods are used, guided by observation and timing rather than approval. These actions are not always framed as defiance. They are often seen as part of the learning process, an effort to understand the full scope of magic. When a student first encounters the material within the restricted section, the experience differs from ordinary study. The language is often more complex, the descriptions less structured. Instructions may be incomplete, requiring interpretation. Some texts assume prior knowledge that has not been formally taught. Others present ideas without clear guidance on their application. This lack of clarity creates a different kind of engagement, one that relies more heavily on personal judgment. Among these texts are works that describe forms of magic considered dark, books such as those detailing curses, enchantments that influence the mind, or rituals tied to deeper transformations. These works do not always present themselves as harmful. They are often written in the same measured tone as other magical texts, describing effects and methods without overt warning. It is the content itself that carries weight, not the way it is introduced. The absence of explicit warning can make these texts seem approachable. A spell described on a page appears no different from one taught in class. The structure is familiar, the components recognizable, yet the intent behind these spells differs. They are designed not to assist or protect, but to alter, to control, or to harm in ways that extend beyond temporary effect. For a student already accustomed to using magic for influence, this knowledge can feel like a continuation rather than a departure. The progression appears logical. If minor spells can shape small outcomes, then more advanced spells may shape larger ones. The distinction between acceptable and unacceptable becomes less defined, especially when the knowledge itself is presented without clear boundaries. At this stage, the role of intention becomes more complex. The student is no longer limited to what has been taught. They are exposed to possibilities that extend beyond structured learning. Each decision to explore further is guided not only by curiosity, but by the patterns already established. If magic has been used for control in the past, the new knowledge is likely to be approached with the same mindset. This is where knowledge begins to influence practice in a more direct way. Reading about a spell is not the same as casting it, but it introduces the idea that such a spell exists. It creates familiarity with concepts that were previously unknown. Even without immediate action, the awareness itself becomes part of the individual's understanding of magic. In some cases, the knowledge remains theoretical. The student reads, considers, and moves on. In others, the information lingers, returning in moments where it may be applied. A situation arises where a more powerful spell could provide advantage. The memory of the text becomes relevant, offering a potential solution that would not have been considered before. This process is gradual. It does not require immediate action or clear intent to cause harm. It begins with exposure, followed by familiarity, and eventually by consideration. Each step moves slightly further from the original boundaries of magical education, guided by the individual's willingness to explore. The restricted section, in this sense, serves as a threshold. It does not compel action, but it presents possibility. It offers knowledge that extends beyond the neutral application of magic, placing responsibility on the one who seeks it. The presence of such knowledge acknowledges that magic is not limited to what is taught. It exists in forms that require choice rather than instruction. Within the wider wizarding world, similar principles apply. Certain books, artifacts, and teachings are preserved despite their potential for harm. They are kept not because they are safe, but because they are part of the history and structure of magic itself. This preservation ensures that the knowledge is not lost, but it also ensures that it remains accessible to those who seek it. For the individual, the decision to engage with this knowledge marks a shift. It reflects a willingness to move beyond the boundaries set by formal education. It introduces a new layer of responsibility, one that is not enforced externally, but carried internally. The magic itself does not change in this moment, but the understanding of what it can do begins to expand. This expansion creates a foundation for the next stage. With knowledge comes the possibility of application. The spells remain words on a page until they are spoken, movements in the air until they are performed. Yet the distance between knowing and doing becomes smaller with each exposure. The path forward becomes clearer, not through instruction, but through awareness. In this way, the study of forbidden magic does not begin with action. It begins with understanding, a quiet shift from what is taught to what is discovered. And once that shift has taken place, the boundaries that once defined magic begin to feel less certain, opening the way for deeper exploration. As understanding deepens, the structure of harmful magic becomes clearer. What once appeared as isolated spells begins to form a system, one that can be studied, analyzed, and, with enough practice, replicated with increasing precision. The distinction between simple disruption and intentional harm is no longer based only on outcome. It begins to reflect design. Within magical theory, spells are not random expressions. They follow patterns. Incantations carry meaning, often rooted in older languages. Wand movements direct energy in specific ways. Focus determines strength and accuracy. When these elements align, the result becomes consistent. This consistency allows spells to be categorized, refined, and passed from one practitioner to another. Jinxes, hexes, and curses represent a progression within this system. Each category introduces a deeper level of influence over the target. A jinx disrupts, often briefly, altering movement or perception in a way that can be easily undone. A hex introduces discomfort or imbalance, extending the effect beyond a moment, though still within limits. A curse, however, is constructed with a different intention. It is designed to cause lasting harm, to impose a condition that is not easily reversed. The difference between these forms is not always visible at a glance. Two spells may appear similar in execution, yet produce very different outcomes. The key lies in how they are constructed. A curse requires a more deliberate alignment of intent, focus, and magical force. It cannot be cast effectively without a clear purpose behind it. This requirement creates a boundary, one that separates casual use from intentional harm. As students encounter these distinctions, they begin to understand that harmful magic is not simply a stronger version of what they already know. It is structured differently. It demands more than repetition. It requires a willingness to direct magic toward a specific outcome, regardless of the effect on the target. This realization introduces a new level of awareness. In some cases, this awareness remains theoretical. The student learns the classifications, recognizes the differences, and moves forward without applying them. In other cases, the knowledge becomes a point of interest. The idea that spells can be designed to produce controlled harm invites closer examination. How does one spell differ from another? What elements determine whether an effect fades or persists? These questions lead to deeper engagement with magical structure. Texts are studied not only for their instructions, but for the patterns they reveal. Incantations are examined for their linguistic roots. Wand movements are analyzed for their precision. The relationship between focus and outcome becomes a subject of experimentation. Through this process, the individual begins to see magic not just as a set of spells, but as a system that can be understood and, in some cases, adapted. This understanding introduces a subtle shift in perspective. Instead of relying solely on taught methods, the individual begins to consider how magic might be altered. A spell may be adjusted slightly, its effect extended or redirected. A known incantation may be combined with a different movement, producing a variation that was not originally intended. These experiments are not always successful, but they reinforce the idea that magic is flexible. With flexibility comes possibility. The boundaries that once seemed fixed begin to feel open to interpretation. If a spell can be modified, then its purpose can also be changed. A charm designed to influence an object might be redirected toward a person. A hex that causes discomfort might be intensified to produce pain. Each adjustment builds on existing knowledge, moving further from the original intent of the spell. At this stage, the act of casting becomes more deliberate. The individual is no longer simply performing a known sequence. They are applying understanding, shaping the spell through intention and structure. This level of engagement requires focus, but it also allows for greater control. The outcome becomes more predictable, aligned closely with the desired effect. The concept of harmful magic as a system also introduces the idea of efficiency. Certain spells achieve their effects with minimal effort, while others require more precise execution. A practitioner may begin to favor spells that produce stronger results with less complexity. This preference can lead to the repeated use of certain forms of magic, reinforcing familiarity and skill. Over time, this repetition creates confidence. The individual becomes aware of their ability to produce specific outcomes reliably. This awareness can influence decision-making, encouraging the use of these spells in situations where simpler methods might have been sufficient. The choice is no longer based solely on necessity, but on effectiveness. In the broader context of the wizarding world, this level of understanding is often associated with advanced magical practice. Skilled witches and wizards are able to analyze spells, to understand their components, and to adapt them when needed. This ability is not inherently harmful. It can be used to develop protective magic, to create new charms, or to refine existing techniques. However, when combined with the patterns established in earlier stages, this knowledge can lead in a different direction. The individual who has already grown accustomed to using magic for control may apply this deeper understanding toward more precise forms of influence. The system becomes a tool, one that allows for greater impact with each use. This is where the distinction between knowledge and application becomes more pronounced. Understanding the structure of harmful magic does not require its use, yet the more familiar the system becomes, the more accessible its application appears. The distance between theory and practice continues to narrow. In some instances, this narrowing is gradual, marked by small experiments and limited use. In others, it may occur more quickly, driven by specific situations that call for stronger action. A moment of conflict may lead to the use of a more advanced spell, one that would not have been considered earlier. The outcome reinforces the effectiveness of the method, encouraging further use. The system itself does not guide these choices. It provides the means, but not the direction. The direction is shaped by the individual, by the patterns already in place, and by the intentions that continue to develop. As these elements align, the use of harmful magic becomes more consistent, more deliberate, and more integrated into the individual's approach. At this level, the progression remains contained within the realm of learned structure. The spells used are known, their effects understood, yet the way they are applied reflects a deeper engagement with the principles of magic. The individual is no longer limited to surface-level casting. They operate within the system itself, shaping outcomes through knowledge and intent. This foundation prepares the way for the next stage, where knowledge is no longer abstract. It begins to influence relationships, beliefs, and choices in a more direct way. The system of magic becomes part of a broader framework, one that extends beyond individual spells and into the influence of others. As knowledge expands, it rarely develops in isolation. The understanding of magic is shaped not only by study, but by the people who surround it. At this stage, influence begins to move beyond books and into conversation, observation, and belief. The ideas that guide how magic is used are often introduced indirectly, carried through the words and actions of others. Within Hogwarts, older students often serve as informal guides. Their experience gives them a certain authority, not assigned by the school, but recognized through familiarity. They demonstrate spells that are not part of early lessons, speak of techniques that are not fully explained in class, and share perspectives shaped by their own understanding. These interactions are not always structured. They occur in common rooms, in corridors, and in moments where curiosity leads to quiet exchange. For a younger student, this exposure can feel like access to something more advanced, something closer to mastery. The information may not be complete, and the guidance may not be precise, but it carries a sense of progression. The boundaries set by formal instruction begin to feel less rigid when others appear to move beyond them with ease. Beyond the school environment, family plays a significant role in shaping belief. Some students arrive with a clear understanding of how magic is viewed within their household. Traditions are passed down, often without question, forming a foundation that influences future choices. In certain families, magic is seen as a tool for maintaining status, for reinforcing position within the wizarding world. In others, it is approached with caution, guided by principles of restraint. Among these influences, ideas about blood status can become particularly significant. The concept of pure blood identity, preserved through generations, carries with it a sense of distinction. For those raised within this framework, magic is not only a skill, but a marker of heritage. The belief that certain lines are stronger or more deserving of power introduces a hierarchy, one that shapes how magic is perceived and used. This hierarchy does not always present itself as overt hostility. It can appear in subtle ways, through language, through expectations, and through the assumptions made about others. A student may begin to see certain individuals as less capable or less connected to the deeper aspects of magic. These perceptions influence interaction, creating distance where none existed before. Figures within the wider wizarding world reinforce these ideas. Individuals like Lucius Malfoy represent a continuation of these beliefs, embodying a perspective where control and influence are valued. Their actions demonstrate how magic can be used not only on an individual level, but within a broader system of power. Observing such figures, even from a distance, can shape how students understand the role of magic in society. This influence is not always direct. It does not require formal instruction or explicit endorsement. It develops through repeated exposure, through conversations that frame certain ideas as natural or expected. Over time, these ideas become part of the individual's perspective, guiding decisions without the need for conscious consideration. Within peer groups, these beliefs can be reinforced or challenged. A group that values control may encourage the use of more advanced or harmful spells, viewing them as a sign of capability. Another group may resist such approaches, favoring restraint and cooperation. The individual moves between these influences, shaped by the responses they receive. As these dynamics develop, the use of magic begins to reflect not only personal intention, but shared understanding. A spell is no longer just an action. It becomes a statement, an expression of alignment with a particular way of thinking. The choice of magic carries meaning beyond its immediate effect, signaling how the individual sees themselves and others. This is where the progression becomes more structured. The earlier stages were shaped by impulse and curiosity. Now, there is a framework, influenced by external perspectives. The individual begins to adopt patterns that reflect these influences, integrating them into their approach to magic. The use of control becomes more consistent, supported by a belief that it is justified. At this level, justification plays an important role. Actions that might once have been questioned are now supported by reasoning. The idea that certain outcomes are necessary, or that certain individuals are deserving of influence, provides a foundation for continued use of harmful magic. The boundary between right and wrong becomes less defined, replaced by a sense of purpose shaped by belief. This process does not occur uniformly. Some individuals resist these influences, maintaining a different perspective. Others adopt them more fully, allowing them to guide their actions. The variation reflects the complexity of the environment, where multiple ideas exist simultaneously, each offering a different path. For those who continue along this progression, the influence of mentors and ideology becomes a stabilizing force. It provides consistency, reinforcing patterns that might otherwise be uncertain. The individual no longer acts solely on impulse or curiosity. Their actions are guided by a broader understanding, one that aligns with a particular view of the world. This alignment strengthens the connection between knowledge and application. The spells learned earlier are now used with greater purpose, supported by belief. The system of magic becomes a means of expressing that belief, shaping interactions and outcomes in ways that extend beyond individual situations. At this stage, the transition into deeper forms of dark magic becomes more accessible. The foundation has been established through knowledge, reinforced through influence, and guided by ideology. The individual is prepared not only to understand more advanced magic, but to use it in a way that reflects their evolving perspective. The progression continues, not through sudden change, but through steady reinforcement. And as these choices accumulate, the distance from the original neutrality of magic continues to grow, moving further into a space where intention and belief define what comes next. As knowledge settles into familiarity, the distance between understanding and action begins to narrow. What was once observed from a distance now feels closer, more accessible, and more immediate. The spells described in books, the techniques demonstrated by others, and the ideas shaped through belief all begin to align. At this point, curiosity no longer remains separate from practice. It starts to move toward it. The transition does not happen all at once. It develops through small moments, often unnoticed at first. A student may recall a spell read in passing, considering how it might function outside the page. The thought lingers, returning in situations where it seems relevant. A moment of difficulty, a challenge that feels unresolved, or a desire to achieve a specific outcome can bring that knowledge forward. The idea of trying becomes more present. Early attempts are often cautious, The spell may be practiced in isolation, away from observation, where mistakes carry less immediate consequence. The incantation may be spoken quietly, the movement of the wand tentative at first. The result may be incomplete, requiring repetition. Each attempt builds familiarity, turning uncertainty into something more stable. In these moments, the act of practice carries its own sense of discovery. The individual is no longer relying solely on what has been taught. They are engaging with magic on their own terms, testing its boundaries and observing the results. This process creates a sense of autonomy, reinforcing the idea that knowledge can be applied independently. As practice continues, confidence begins to form. The spell becomes more consistent, its effects more predictable. What was once an experiment becomes a reliable method. This reliability changes how the magic is perceived. It is no longer something distant or theoretical. It becomes part of the individual's available choices, ready to be used when needed. With this change, secrecy becomes more deliberate. The awareness that certain spells are not meant for open use creates a separation between public and private action. Practice is confined to moments where it will not be observed, and success is kept unspoken. This separation reinforces the idea that the magic being used exists outside the accepted boundaries, even if those boundaries have already begun to feel less certain. Over time, the use of these spells may extend beyond practice into application. A situation arises where the spell offers a clear advantage, and the individual chooses to use it. The decision may feel natural, supported by prior knowledge, and reinforced by successful practice. The outcome confirms the effectiveness of the method, strengthening the pattern. Each use reduces hesitation. The first application may carry a sense of uncertainty, but as it is repeated, that uncertainty fades. The spell becomes another option among many, selected based on its ability to produce a desired result. The focus shifts from whether it should be used to how effectively it can be applied. This shift reflects a deeper change in perspective. Magic is no longer guided primarily by external instruction or internal restraints. It is guided by outcome. The question becomes one of effectiveness rather than limitation. If a spell achieves its purpose, it is seen as valid within the context of the moment. At the same time, the influence of earlier patterns continues to shape these decisions. The tendency to use magic for control, the connection between emotion and action, and the influence of external beliefs all contribute to how these spells are chosen and applied. The knowledge gained in earlier stages now finds expression through practice, creating a more consistent approach. The boundary between minor harm and more deliberate action begins to blur. A spell that was once practiced in isolation may now be used in interaction with others. Its effect may be more pronounced, its purpose more defined. The distinction between experimentation and intention becomes less clear, replaced by a steady pattern of use. In this environment, the role of consequence remains limited. The spells used at this stage may still fall within a range that can be reversed or managed. This containment allows the pattern to continue without interruption. The absence of significant consequence reinforces the belief that the actions are acceptable, or at least manageable. However, the cumulative effect of these choices continues to shape the individual's relationship with magic. Each act of application strengthens the connection between knowledge and use. The spells become integrated into behavior, no longer separate from daily interaction. Magic is used not only when necessary, but when it offers an advantage. This integration creates a sense of progression. The individual moves forward through experience, guided by what has worked in the past. The path becomes clearer, defined by repeated success and supported by growing confidence. The use of more advanced forms of magic begins to feel like a natural extension of this process. At this stage, the progression is no longer driven solely by curiosity. It is supported by practice, reinforced by outcome, and guided by established patterns. The individual has moved beyond observation into participation, engaging with forms of magic that extend further from their original purpose. The environment around them may not fully reflect this change. To others, their actions may appear similar to those seen before, small variations within familiar behavior. Yet beneath the surface, the intent has become more focused, the application more deliberate. The shift is internal, shaping how each decision is made. This prepares the ground for what follows. With practice comes familiarity, and with familiarity comes the ability to act without hesitation. The spells that once required thought become immediate, shaped by instinct and reinforced by experience. The path forward continues, moving toward forms of magic where the effects are no longer easily contained, and the consequences extend beyond the moment in which they are cast. As practice becomes consistent, there comes a point where the nature of magic shifts again. The spells that once existed within the range of inconvenience or discomfort begin to give way to something more deliberate. The intention behind them is no longer uncertain. It becomes defined, directed toward producing harm that is not easily dismissed as minor or temporary. This stage is marked not by a single spell, but by a decision. It is the moment when magic is used with the clear understanding that it will cause real pain or lasting impact. The individual is no longer experimenting or reacting without thought. They are choosing an outcome and shaping their magic to achieve it. The first use of such a spell often carries a sense of awareness that was not present before. The incantation is spoken with more focus, the wand movement more precise. There is less hesitation, but also a recognition that something different is taking place. The magic responds accordingly, aligning itself with the clarity of intent behind it. When the effect occurs, it is distinct from earlier experiences. A jinx may have caused brief disruption, a hex discomfort that fades. This is different. The result lingers, creating a condition that extends beyond the moment of casting. Pain, restriction, or visible alteration may remain, shaping the target's experience in a way that is not easily reversed. The immediate response to this outcome can vary. In some cases, there is a pause, a recognition of the shift that has occurred. In others, the focus remains on the effectiveness of the spell, on the fact that it achieved its purpose. The reaction depends on the patterns already established. If control has become the primary objective, the success of the spell may overshadow its impact. This is where desensitization begins to take form. The first instance may feel significant, but repetition reduces that significance over time. Each use reinforces familiarity, making the act feel more routine. What once seemed notable becomes expected, part of a growing set of available responses. The environment can influence how this process unfolds. In situations where such magic is discouraged, there may be consequences that interrupt the pattern. Yet if these consequences are limited or inconsistent, they may not fully alter behavior. The individual may adapt, becoming more selective about when and where such spells are used, rather than ceasing their use entirely. In other environments, where the use of harmful magic is accepted or even encouraged, the pattern may develop more quickly. The presence of others who use similar spells creates a sense of normalization. The individual is no longer acting alone, and the behavior becomes part of a shared practice. This collective reinforcement strengthens the connection between intention and action. At this level, the distinction between reaction and decision becomes clearer. Earlier stages involved moments of impulse, shaped by emotion or curiosity. Now, the use of harmful magic is often premeditated. The individual considers the situation, selects a spell, and acts with purpose. The outcome is anticipated, not accidental. This anticipation introduces a new dimension to the use of magic. The individual begins to think in terms of effect rather than possibility. The question is no longer whether a spell can be cast, but how it will influence the situation. This focus on outcome aligns closely with the structure of more advanced forms of dark magic, where intention must be precise for the spell to function. The experience of causing harm through magic also affects perception. The target is no longer seen solely as another individual, but as the recipient of an action. This shift can create distance, reducing the sense of connection that might otherwise influence behavior. Over time, this distance can make repeated use of such magic easier, as the emotional impact becomes less immediate. This process does not eliminate awareness. The individual understands what the spell does and recognizes its effect. However, the significance of that effect becomes less central to decision-making. The focus remains on the purpose of the action and its success in achieving the desired result. Within the broader structure of magical learning, this stage represents a movement beyond controlled environments. The spells used are not typically part of early instruction, and their application extends beyond the boundaries of structured lessons. The individual is operating with a degree of independence, guided by their own understanding rather than external guidance. This independence carries both capability and risk. The ability to produce stronger effects allows for greater influence, but it also increases the potential for unintended consequences. A spell cast with precision may still have effects that extend further than expected, especially when used in situations that are not fully controlled. Despite this, the pattern often continues. Each successful use reinforces confidence, encouraging further application. The individual becomes more comfortable with the level of harm their magic can produce, integrating it into their approach without the hesitation that may have been present before. At this point, the progression into deeper forms of dark magic becomes more direct. The foundation has been established through knowledge, influence, and practice. The individual has crossed the threshold where magic is used not only for control, but for deliberate harm. The next stages build upon this foundation, introducing forms of magic that require even greater alignment between intention and action. The transition is not abrupt. It follows the same pattern as before, moving through repetition and reinforcement. Each use of harmful magic strengthens the connection between thought and effect, preparing the individual for spells that demand a higher degree of focus and commitment. In this way, the first use of true curses marks a turning point. It does not define the end of one path, but the continuation of it. The magic remains responsive, shaped by intention as it always has been. What changes is the clarity of that intention and the willingness to direct it toward outcomes that extend beyond temporary influence. The path forward becomes more defined, guided by the patterns already in place. The use of magic for harm is no longer an exception. It becomes part of the structure through which decisions are made, shaping how each new situation is approached. And as this structure settles, it opens the way to forms of magic where the effects are not only lasting, but deeply tied to the nature of the one who casts them. As understanding deepens and the use of harmful magic becomes more deliberate, certain spells stand apart from all others. They are not simply more advanced or more difficult. They exist within a category defined by their purpose, their effect, and the intent required to cast them. Within the wizarding world, these spells are known collectively as the Unforgivable curses. Their name does not refer to complexity or rarity. It reflects the judgment placed upon their use. Unlike other forms of magic, which may be restricted or discouraged, these curses are considered beyond justification. Their use against another human being carries consequences that extend far beyond the moment of casting, both legally and morally. The Ministry of Magic recognizes 3 such curses. Each represents a distinct form of control over another person. The imperious curse removes autonomy, placing the target under complete external influence. The cruciatis curse inflicts intense, sustained pain, overwhelming the senses and leaving lasting damage. The killing curse ends life instantly, without visible injury, severing the connection between body and soul. These curses are not introduced in early education. They exist as part of advanced knowledge, often discussed in the context of defense rather than practice. Students learn of them as something to be understood, not used. The emphasis is placed on recognition, on the ability to identify when such magic is present, and to resist or counter it where possible. What distinguishes these curses from others is not only their effect, but the requirement behind them. They cannot be cast successfully through simple repetition or partial focus. Each demands a clear and complete alignment between intent and action. The caster must fully will the outcome, without hesitation or uncertainty. Without this clarity, the spell fails or produces a diminished effect. This requirement creates a boundary that is not easily crossed. It is not enough to know the incantation or the movement. The individual must reach a state where the intended result is accepted without conflict. This alignment reflects a deeper level of engagement with magic, one that goes beyond technique and into the nature of intention itself. The presence of these curses within magical knowledge serves multiple purposes. On one level, it acknowledges the existence of forms of magic capable of profound harm. On another, it establishes a clear limit, a point beyond which the use of magic is no longer considered acceptable under any circumstance. This limit is reinforced through law, through education, and through the shared understanding of the wizarding community. Despite this, the knowledge of these curses persists. They are studied, documented, and preserved within certain contexts. This preservation reflects the broader approach to magical knowledge, where understanding is maintained even when use is prohibited. The ability to recognize and respond to such magic requires familiarity, even if that familiarity is meant to remain theoretical. For those who have already begun to use magic for deliberate harm, the existence of these curses introduces a new dimension. They represent the highest level of control over another person, each addressing a different aspect of experience. Autonomy, sensation, and existence itself can be altered or removed through these spells. The scope of their effect extends beyond anything encountered in earlier stages. At this point, the progression becomes more defined. The earlier use of harmful spells has established a pattern, one that aligns intention with outcome. The individual understands how to direct magic toward a specific effect and has experienced the results of doing so. The introduction of these curses builds upon that understanding, presenting forms of magic that require even greater precision of intent. The distinction between knowing and using becomes more significant here. Awareness of these curses does not imply action. Many who learn of them never attempt to cast them, recognizing the boundary they represent. For others, however, the knowledge itself becomes a point of consideration. The possibility of such control exists, and the patterns established in earlier stages influence how that possibility is perceived. This stage remains focused on understanding rather than application. The structure of the curses, their effects, and their place within magical lore are observed and considered. The individual becomes aware of what lies beyond the current level of practice, recognizing that there are forms of magic that demand a different kind of commitment. The environment continues to play a role in shaping this perception. In settings where these curses are discussed as threats to be resisted, they reinforce the importance of restraint. In other contexts, where darker ideologies take hold, they may be presented differently, as tools to be mastered rather than avoided. The interpretation depends on the surrounding influence. What remains constant is the nature of the curses themselves. They do not change in response to perspective. Their effects remain absolute, their requirements unchanged. They stand as a fixed point within the progression of dark magic, representing a level where intention must be complete and the consequences are no longer temporary. As the individual continues along this path, the presence of these curses shapes the direction of future choices. They define what is possible, setting a standard for the level of control that can be achieved through magic. Whether approached with caution or interest, they mark a threshold, one that separates earlier forms of harm from deeper engagement with the most powerful expressions of dark magic. The progression does not pause here. Understanding leads to consideration, and consideration may lead further still. The alignment between intention and action, already established in earlier stages, becomes the foundation upon which these more advanced forms of magic are built. And as that alignment strengthens, the distance between knowledge and use continues to narrow, guiding the path forward. Among the unforgivable curses, one stands apart for the way it reshapes control. It does not damage the body or end life. Instead, it reaches into the mind, altering the space where choice is formed. The imperious curse operates by replacing a person's will with that of another, creating a state where action is no longer guided from within. At first, the concept may seem distant, difficult to fully grasp without experience. Control in earlier stages of magic involved influence, brief disruption, or imposed discomfort. The imperious curse removes even the possibility of resistance, placing the target in a condition where thought and action are directed entirely by the caster. When the curse takes hold, the effect is described as a lightness, a sense of release from decision. The target no longer feels the need to question or choose. Instructions are accepted without hesitation, carried out with clarity and ease. From the outside, the change may appear subtle, movement remains natural, speech continues as expected, yet the source of those actions has shifted completely. This form of control differs from other spells, not only in its effect, but in its duration. A jinx fades, a hex can be countered. Even more advanced curses often have limits. The imperious curse, however, can persist as long as it is maintained. The connection between caster and target remains active, allowing continuous direction over time. The ability to sustain this connection requires focus. The caster must remain aware, maintaining the thread of control without interruption. This creates a dynamic where the act of casting is not a single moment, but an ongoing process. Each command reinforces the link, ensuring that the target continues to act in accordance with the imposed will. Within the wizarding world, the use of this curse is strictly forbidden, not only because of its power, but because of what it removes. Autonomy, the ability to make independent decisions, is considered fundamental. The imperious curse eliminates this entirely, reducing the individual to a vessel for another's intent. This loss extends beyond the immediate effect, altering how the target experiences their own actions. For those who have already begun to use magic for deliberate harm, the idea of such control can hold a certain clarity. Earlier stages introduced influence, the ability to shape outcomes through spells that affected behavior or perception. The imperious curse represents the complete extension of that influence. It does not persuade or disrupt, it replaces. The first consideration of using such a spell often arises from this progression. If smaller forms of control have proven effective, the possibility of total control becomes a natural extension of that pattern. The knowledge that such a spell exists, combined with the understanding of how it functions, reduces the distance between thought and action. When the curse is cast successfully for the first time, the experience is distinct. The alignment between intention and outcome must be precise. There can be no hesitation, no conflict within the caster's mind. The desire to control must be complete, directed entirely toward the target. When this alignment is achieved, the effect follows immediately. The response from the target reinforces the nature of the spell. Actions are carried out without resistance, confirming that control has been established. This confirmation can influence the caster's perception of the spell, emphasizing its effectiveness rather than its implications. The focus remains on what has been achieved, not on what has been altered. Over time, repeated use can further shape this perception. The act of controlling another person becomes familiar, integrated into behavior in the same way earlier spells were. Each use reduces the sense of distinction, making the spell feel less exceptional and more routine. The boundary that once marked it as forbidden begins to lose its clarity. In broader contexts, the imperious curse has been used to influence events on a larger scale. Individuals placed under its control can carry out actions that affect others, extending the caster's reach beyond direct interaction. This capacity for indirect influence allows the curse to function as part of a system, shaping outcomes without visible force. This use reflects a shift from individual action to structured control. The spell becomes a means of guiding others, not through persuasion or agreement, but through imposed direction. The individual under the curse acts as an extension of the caster's intent, creating a chain of actions that originate from a single source. Despite its effectiveness, the curse is not without limitation. Some individuals are capable of resisting its influence, though this requires significant mental strength. The presence of resistance introduces a variable, one that reminds the caster that control is not absolute in all cases. This awareness can influence how the spell is used, encouraging greater precision and focus. The existence of resistance also reinforces the importance of intent. The stronger and more consistent the caster's will, the more effective the control becomes. This relationship between intention and outcome mirrors earlier stages, but with greater intensity. The spell demands clarity, and in return, it provides a level of influence that extends beyond any previous form of magic. At this stage, the progression into deeper levels of dark magic becomes more defined. The use of the imperious curse represents a point where control is no longer partial or temporary. It is complete, sustained, and directed entirely by the caster. The individual has moved beyond influencing outcomes to determining them through the actions of others. This shift affects not only how magic is used, but how others are perceived. The target becomes less an independent presence and more a means through which an objective is achieved. This change in perspective reduces the role of mutual interaction, replacing it with a one-sided dynamic where control defines the relationship. As this pattern continues, the use of such magic becomes integrated into a broader framework of behavior. Decisions are made with the understanding that control can be applied directly without the need for negotiation or compromise. The presence of this option shapes how situations are approached, guiding choices in ways that extend beyond the immediate moment. The progression does not end here. The imperious curse represents one aspect of deeper dark magic, focusing on control of the mind. Other forms extend into different areas, each requiring a similar alignment of intention and action. Together, they form a system where magic is used to alter fundamental aspects of experience. The path forward remains consistent with earlier stages. Knowledge leads to consideration, consideration to practice, and practice to integration. Each step builds upon the last, creating a structure where more advanced forms of magic become accessible. And as this structure continues to develop, the distance between intention and effect grows ever smaller, shaping the course of what follows. Among the forms of dark magic that shape this progression, there is one that centers not on control of action, but on the experience of pain itself. The cruciatis curse does not guide movement or alter decision. It directs magic toward sensation, overwhelming the body with a level of suffering that is both immediate and sustained. Its purpose is clear, and unlike many other spells, it does not disguise its intent. The structure of this curse requires more than knowledge. As with the others in its category, it depends on the alignment between the caster's intention and the effect they seek to produce. The incantation and movement are only part of the process. For the spell to function fully, there must be a deliberate will to cause pain. Without that clarity, the curse weakens or fails, unable to sustain the intensity required. When the spell takes hold, its effect is described as overwhelming. The target experiences pain that cannot be easily measured or compared. It is not localized or temporary. It spreads through the body, disrupting movement and thought. The individual loses the ability to act normally, their focus consumed entirely by the sensation imposed upon them. The experience is not only physical, it extends into the mind, creating a state where nothing else can be considered. Unlike earlier forms of harmful magic, which often leave room for recovery within moments, the cruciatis curse introduces a different scale of consequence. Prolonged exposure can lead to lasting damage, affecting both the body and the mind. This persistence distinguishes it from lesser curses, placing it within a category where the effects extend beyond immediate control. The use of such a spell represents a further step in the progression of dark magic. The earlier stages involved influence, disruption, and control. This stage focuses on suffering as an objective. The intention behind the magic is no longer limited to achieving a specific outcome. It becomes centered on the experience of the target, shaping that experience in a way that is defined by pain. For those who have already engaged with harmful magic, the introduction of this curse builds upon existing patterns. The ability to direct magic toward another person has been established. The understanding of how intention shapes outcome is already present. The cruciatis curse requires these elements, but with greater intensity. The caster must not only choose the action, but fully accept the nature of its effect. The first consideration of using such a spell often carries a different weight. The outcome is not subtle or indirect, it is immediate and unmistakable. This clarity can create a moment of pause where the implications are recognized. Yet for some, the established patterns of control and influence reduce this hesitation. The focus remains on the ability to produce the desired effect. When the curse is cast successfully, the result confirms its nature. The target's response is immediate, reinforcing the connection between intention and outcome. This confirmation can influence the caster's perception, emphasizing the effectiveness of the spell rather than the extent of its impact. The act becomes defined by its result, not by its consequence. Over time, repeated use can lead to desensitization similar to earlier stages, though more pronounced. The intensity of the effect does not diminish, but the perception of it changes. What once seemed significant becomes expected. The spell is integrated into behavior, used when it aligns with the individual's objectives. This integration reflects a deeper shift in perspective. The target is no longer viewed in terms of interaction or response. They become the focus of the spell's effect, defined by the experience imposed upon them. The separation between caster and target increases, reducing the influence of empathy or restraint. Within the broader context of the wizarding world, the use of this curse is recognized as one of the most severe violations of magical law. Its impact extends beyond the individual, shaping how such actions are viewed within the community. The prohibition against its use reflects not only its power, but the nature of the intention required to cast it. Despite this, the knowledge of the curse remains. It is understood, studied in limited contexts, and recognized as part of the structure of dark magic. This understanding ensures that it can be identified and resisted where possible, but it also means that it remains accessible to those who choose to pursue it. The relationship between intention and magic becomes even more defined at this stage. The cruciatis curse cannot be cast effectively without a sustained desire to inflict pain. This requirement reinforces the connection between internal state and external effect. The magic reflects not only the action, but the feeling behind it. For the individual progressing along this path, this alignment becomes more familiar. The ability to direct intention toward a specific outcome has been practiced in earlier stages. Now, it is applied with greater intensity, shaping magic that operates on a deeper level. The boundary between thought and effect continues to narrow. This progression does not occur in isolation. It builds upon the patterns already established, each stage reinforcing the next. The use of this curse represents not a sudden change, but a continuation of the same process, guided by intention and supported by experience. As the path continues, Other forms of dark magic extend these principles further. The focus shifts from control of action or sensation to the most final form of influence. The progression remains steady, each step defined by the same underlying connection between intention and magic, moving toward outcomes that are no longer temporary and no longer reversible. As the progression continues, the focus of magic begins to shift from others to the self. Earlier stages centered on influence, control, and the ability to shape another person's experience. Now, attention turns inward toward the nature of identity and how it can be altered through magic. This transition does not begin with the most extreme forms. It starts with practices that appear neutral, even practical, yet carry deeper implications when considered over time. One of the most recognizable examples of this shift is the use of Polyjuice potion. It is not classified as dark magic, and within certain contexts, it is used for legitimate purposes. The potion allows the drinker to assume the physical appearance of another person, replicating voice, features, and outward form with remarkable accuracy. At first, it may seem like a simple extension of magical ability, another method of transformation similar to those taught in class. Yet the nature of this transformation is different. Transfiguration alters objects or the caster's own form through direct magical force, requiring focus and control. Polyjuice potion operates through ingestion, initiating a process that reshapes the body from within. The effect is temporary, lasting for a limited period, but during that time, the individual no longer appears as themselves. Their outward identity is replaced entirely. This experience introduces a new concept. The separation between appearance and identity becomes more apparent. The individual learns that form can be changed without altering the underlying self, creating a distinction between how one is seen and who one is. This distinction can be useful in certain situations, allowing for concealment or access where it would otherwise be restricted. However, repeated use of such magic can influence perception in more subtle ways. When the ability to assume another form becomes familiar, the connection between identity and appearance begins to shift. The individual may start to view their own form as flexible, something that can be altered when necessary rather than something fixed. This perspective changes how they relate to themselves and to others. The act of becoming someone else, even temporarily, carries a psychological effect. While under the influence of the potion, the individual moves through the world with a different presence. Others respond to them based on the form they have taken, not the person they are. This creates a layer of distance, where interaction is filtered through the assumed identity rather than the original one. Over time, this distance can become more comfortable. The individual may begin to rely on transformation not only for practical reasons, but as a way of navigating situations with greater control. The ability to step outside one's own identity, even briefly, can reduce the sense of limitation that comes with being recognized or understood by others. This reliance does not necessarily indicate a shift into dark magic on its own. The potion remains a tool, and its use can be guided by intention. Yet, when combined with earlier patterns of control and influence, it introduces new possibilities. The individual can now shape not only outcomes, but perception itself, determining how they are seen and how they interact within different contexts. This capability aligns with the broader progression. Earlier stages establish the use of magic to influence others. Now, that influence extends to the self, altering the way identity is presented. The individual gains the ability to move between forms, to adopt different roles, and to operate within environments that would otherwise be inaccessible. The distinction between use and dependence becomes important at this stage. Occasional transformation may serve a specific purpose, remaining separate from the individual's sense of self. Frequent use, however, can begin to blur that separation. the individual may find it easier to act within an assumed identity than within their own, especially in situations where control or influence is desired. This shift does not occur suddenly. It develops through repetition, through the gradual integration of transformation into behavior. Each use reinforces the idea that identity is adaptable, that the boundaries between forms can be crossed with relative ease. The individual becomes more comfortable with this flexibility, incorporating it into their understanding of what magic can do. At the same time, the limitations of the transformation remain. The effect is temporary, requiring preparation and resources. The individual must return to their original form, re-establishing the connection between appearance and identity. This return can create a contrast, highlighting the difference between the two states and reinforcing the awareness of what has been altered. This awareness can lead to further exploration. If one form of transformation is possible, the question arises as to what else can be changed. The idea of altering the self through magic becomes a point of interest, extending beyond outward appearance into deeper aspects of identity. The progression moves toward forms of magic that do not simply mask the self, but reshape it in more permanent ways. Within the broader structure of dark magic, this stage represents a transition. The focus is no longer solely on others. It includes the self as both subject and object of magical influence. The individual begins to engage with the idea that identity itself can be modified, that the boundaries defining who they are may not be fixed. This concept prepares the way for more advanced forms of transformation. The temporary nature of Polyjuice potion provides a controlled introduction, allowing the individual to experience altered identity without lasting consequence. Yet the familiarity gained through this process can influence how more permanent changes are approached. As the progression continues, the distinction between temporary and lasting transformation becomes more significant. The ability to alter appearance leads to the possibility of altering essence. The individual, already accustomed to shaping outcomes and influencing others, now begins to consider how deeply magic can reach into the self. In this way, the use of identity-altering magic becomes more than a practical skill. It becomes part of a broader pattern, one that extends the influence of magic inward. The progression remains steady, guided by intention and reinforced by experience. Each step builds upon the last, moving toward forms of magic where the changes are no longer temporary and the boundaries once thought stable begin to dissolve. As the focus turns further inward, the relationship between magic and identity begins to deepen. What once appeared as a series of choices now forms a pattern that extends beyond individual actions. The use of magic is no longer only about influence or transformation. It becomes connected to a broader sense of purpose, shaped by repetition, reinforced by success, and guided by a growing desire for permanence. At this stage, the concept of obsession begins to take form. It does not emerge suddenly or without reason. It develops gradually, built from earlier patterns of control, knowledge, and practice. Each successful use of magic reinforces the belief that outcomes can be shaped with precision. Over time, this belief becomes central, guiding attention towards specific goals that begin to dominate thought. Within the history of the wizarding world, few figures reflect this progression as clearly as Tom Riddle. From an early age, his approach to magic was marked by control and curiosity, but also by a distinct sense of separation from others. His interest in magic extended beyond what was taught, moving quickly toward understanding its limits and how they might be extended. Riddle's early experiences reveal a pattern that aligns with this stage. His actions were not impulsive or uncontrolled. They were deliberate, carried out with awareness of their effect. He used magic to influence those around him, not only to achieve immediate outcomes, but to establish a sense of authority. This consistency created a foundation, one that supported further exploration. As his knowledge grew, so did his focus. Magic was no longer one aspect of his life. It became central to it. The study of spells, the understanding of magical structure, and the pursuit of more advanced forms of power occupied increasing attention. Other considerations began to recede, replaced by a singular direction that shaped his actions. This focus reflects the nature of obsession within magical practice. It is not defined solely by intensity, but by exclusivity. The individual begins to prioritize one aspect of magic above all others, directing time and thought toward its development. The progression becomes less varied, more concentrated, as attention narrows to a specific objective. In Riddle's case, this objective was tied to control and permanence. His interest in magic extended beyond influence over others. It moved toward understanding how magic could alter the boundaries of life itself. This shift required a different level of engagement, one that combined knowledge with a willingness to explore areas that were not openly taught. Secrecy becomes more pronounced at this stage. The individual is no longer experimenting in isolation out of caution alone. The separation from others is intentional, allowing for uninterrupted focus and preventing interference. Knowledge is gathered quietly, often from sources that are not part of formal education. Each discovery adds to the growing structure of understanding. The role of emotion also changes. In earlier stages, emotion influenced magic through reaction or intensity. Here, it becomes more controlled, directed towards sustaining the focus required for continued exploration. The individual learns to maintain a consistent state of mind, reducing distraction and reinforcing the connection between intention and outcome. This control over emotion does not eliminate it. Instead, it channels it into the pursuit itself. The desire to achieve a specific goal becomes the primary driver, shaping both thought and action. Other emotions may be set aside or diminished, not because they are absent, but because they no longer serve the central objective. As this pattern continues, the relationship between magic and identity becomes more tightly connected. The individual begins to define themselves through their pursuit, viewing their progress as an extension of who they are. Success reinforces this connection, creating a feedback loop where achievement strengthens identity, and identity drives further pursuit. This loop can lead to a form of isolation. The focus required to sustain the progression reduces engagement with others, limiting interaction to what supports the objective. Relationships become secondary, valued only insofar as they contribute to the pursuit. Over time, this separation can become more pronounced, shaping how the individual relates to the world around them. Within the broader progression of dark magic, this stage represents a consolidation of earlier elements. Control, knowledge, and practice are no longer separate aspects. They are integrated into a unified approach, guided by a singular direction. The individual operates with clarity, their actions aligned with a consistent purpose. The shift toward permanence becomes more apparent as this stage develops. Temporary effects, once sufficient, begin to feel limited. The individual seeks outcomes that endure, that extend beyond the moment of casting. This desire influences the types of magic that are explored, guiding attention toward forms that offer lasting change. In the case of Riddle, this desire led to the exploration of concepts that extend beyond ordinary magical practice. His focus moved toward understanding the nature of the soul, the possibility of dividing it, and the implications of doing so. These ideas represent a significant departure from earlier stages, requiring not only knowledge, but a willingness to engage with forms of magic that carry profound consequences. The progression to this point has prepared the individual for such exploration. The alignment between intention and action is established. The use of magic for control and influence is familiar. The focus required to sustain long-term pursuit is in place. What remains is the application of these elements to a new domain, one that extends deeper into the structure of identity itself. This stage does not yet involve the final transformation. It represents the approach, the narrowing of focus that leads toward it. The individual stands at a point where the path forward is defined by their objective, supported by the patterns already formed. The decision to continue is shaped not by impulse, but by the consistency of their intent. As the progression moves forward, the exploration of deeper forms of magic becomes more direct. The concepts that once existed as distant possibilities are brought closer, examined with the same focus that has guided earlier stages. The shift from temporary influence to lasting change becomes central, marking the transition into forms of magic where the consequences are no longer easily reversed. In this way, obsession serves as both foundation and direction. It concentrates the individual's efforts, aligning their actions with a singular purpose. It reduces distraction, reinforces intention, and prepares the ground for the next stage of transformation, where the boundaries between magic and identity begin to change in more permanent ways. At this stage, the progression reaches a point where the effect of magic is no longer measured in influence or sensation, but in finality. The killing curse represents a form of magic that does not alter, control, or transform. It ends. Its purpose is singular, and its result leaves no space for continuation. The structure of this curse is deceptively simple. The incantation is brief, the wand movement direct, yet the simplicity of its form does not reflect the depth of what it requires. Like the other unforgivable curses, it cannot be cast without complete alignment between intention and action. The caster must fully will the end of another life, without hesitation or conflict. Any uncertainty disrupts the spell, preventing it from functioning as intended. This requirement introduces a level of clarity that surpasses earlier stages. The use of harmful magic before this point allowed for variation in intent. Pain could be inflicted with different degrees of intensity. Control could be applied with varying levels of focus. The killing curse allows no such variation. It demands a singular objective, carried through without interruption. When the curse is cast successfully, its effect is immediate. There is no visible injury, no gradual change. The target ceases to exist as a living presence, the connection between body and life ending in an instant. The absence of physical damage distinguishes it from other forms of harm, emphasizing the directness of its effect. For the individual progressing through these levels, the consideration of such a spell represents a significant shift. Earlier stages involved actions that could be reversed, resisted, or endured. This stage introduces a form of magic where the outcome is absolute. The decision to cast it cannot be separated from its consequence, as the two are inseparable. The first contemplation of using this curse often carries a different weight from previous forms of magic. The clarity of its purpose leaves little room for interpretation. The individual understands what the spell does and what it requires. This awareness creates a moment where intention must be examined fully, without the ambiguity that existed before. For some, this moment results in restraint, a recognition that the boundary should not be crossed. For others, the established patterns of control and focus reduce this hesitation. The desire to achieve a specific outcome may outweigh the significance of the act itself. The progression to this point has already aligned intention with action, preparing the individual for a decision of this nature. When the curse is used, the experience differs from earlier forms of magic. There is no gradual escalation, no extended effect. The result is immediate, confirming the alignment between the caster's will and the outcome. This confirmation reinforces the relationship between intention and magic, demonstrating that the most final of effects can be achieved through precise alignment. The emotional aspect of this stage becomes more complex. The requirement for complete intent suggests a level of detachment, where hesitation or conflict must be set aside. The individual must reach a state where the action is carried out without internal resistance. This state reflects a deeper transformation, one that extends beyond the act itself. Over time, repeated use of such magic can further shape this transformation. The act becomes integrated into behavior, its significance altered through familiarity. What once represented a boundary becomes part of a pattern, guided by the same principles that have defined earlier stages. The focus remains on outcome, reinforced by consistency. This integration affects perception in a profound way. The target is no longer seen as an individual with whom interaction occurs. They become the focus of the spell's effect, defined by the result that is imposed upon them. This shift increases the distance between caster and target, reducing the influence of factors that might otherwise limit action. Within the broader wizarding world, the use of the killing curse is recognized as one of the most severe violations of magical law. Its prohibition reflects not only its power, but the nature of the intent required to cast it. The consequences of its use extend beyond the individual, shaping how such actions are understood within the community. Despite this, the knowledge of the curse remains, preserved as part of the structure of dark magic. Its existence defines the upper boundary of what magic can achieve in terms of harm. It stands as a fixed point within the progression, representing a level where intention and effect are fully aligned. For the individual moving through this path, the use of such magic marks a further consolidation of earlier patterns. The alignment between intention and action, developed through previous stages, reaches its most direct expression. The magic responds without variation, producing an outcome that cannot be altered or reversed. This stage also introduces a sense of limitation within dark magic itself. While the curse achieves its purpose completely, it does not provide control beyond that moment. The act ends the interaction, leaving no further influence over the target. This limitation contrasts with earlier forms of magic that allowed for sustained control or repeated effect. This contrast can influence how the individual approaches the use of such magic. The decision to end rather than control reflects a different kind of objective, one that prioritizes finality over continuation. The progression includes both forms, each serving a different purpose within the broader structure of dark magic. As the path continues, attention begins to shift toward forms of magic that extend beyond individual actions. The focus moves from singular outcomes to lasting transformations, where the effects of magic are embedded within the structure of the self. The groundwork for this shift has already been established through the alignment of intention, knowledge, and practice. The killing curse, in this context, represents both an endpoint and a transition. It defines the most direct expression of harmful intent, while also highlighting the limitations of such expression. The progression moves forward, guided by the same principles, toward forms of magic that seek not only to end, but to alter the conditions of existence itself. In this way, the stage reflects a culmination of earlier developments. While preparing for what follows, the individual has reached a level where intention is clear, action is precise, and outcome is certain. What remains is the exploration of how magic can extend beyond these boundaries, shaping not only others, but the nature of the self in ways that endure beyond the moment. By this stage, the progression is no longer defined only by the spells that are used, but by the way identity itself has begun to change. Earlier actions were shaped by intention, reinforced through repetition, and guided by growing control. Now, those patterns settle into something more stable, forming a consistent way of thinking that influences every decision that follows. The use of magic for harm has become familiar. It no longer stands apart as an exception. It is integrated into behavior, applied when it aligns with purpose, and supported by the understanding that has developed over time. The boundary that once separated acceptable use from harmful intent has shifted, not through a single action, but through the accumulation of many. At this level, the individual does not need to consider each choice in isolation. The framework has already been established. Control, influence, and outcome guide the process. Reducing the need for reflection, magic is used with clarity, directed towards specific results without the hesitation that marked earlier stages. This clarity brings with it a change in perception. Others are no longer seen primarily as equals within shared interaction. They become variables within a system, elements that can be influenced, controlled, or removed, depending on the situation. The sense of mutual connection diminishes, replaced by a more distant and structured view of relationships. This shift is not always conscious. It develops gradually, shaped by repeated experiences where control has proven effective. Each instance reinforces the idea that outcomes can be determined through magic, reducing the importance of other forms of interaction. Over time, this perspective becomes consistent, guiding behavior without the need for deliberate thought. The emotional aspect of this stage reflects this change. Earlier, emotion influenced magic through reaction or intensity. Now, it is often set aside or directed in a controlled manner. Feelings that might interfere with clarity are reduced, while those that support focus are maintained. This creates a state where action is guided more by intention than by immediate emotional response. Empathy, which once played a role in shaping decisions, becomes less central. The repeated use of harmful magic creates distance, making it easier to act without considering the experience of others. This does not necessarily eliminate awareness, but it changes how that awareness is used. The focus remains on the objective, rather than on the effect. At the same time, the individual's sense of self becomes more closely tied to their ability to control outcomes. Magic is no longer just a tool. It becomes part of identity, defining how the individual sees themselves within the wizarding world. Their value is measured through capability, through the precision and effectiveness of their actions. This connection between identity and magic reinforces the progression. Each successful use of magic confirms the individual's position, strengthening the belief that they are capable of shaping their surrounding. This belief becomes stable, forming a foundation upon which further actions are built. The concept of morality, which once provided a reference for decision-making, becomes less distinct. Instead of clear boundaries, there is a focus on purpose. Actions are evaluated based on their alignment with objectives rather than on predefined rules. This shift allows for greater flexibility, but it also removes constraints that might otherwise limit behavior. Within this framework, the use of advanced forms of dark magic becomes more accessible. The individual has already demonstrated the ability to align intention with action, to sustain focus, and to apply knowledge in a consistent manner. These elements are essential for engaging with deeper forms of magic, where the requirements are more demanding. The transition into these forms is not marked by a single moment. It follows the same pattern as earlier stages, moving through consideration, practice, and integration. The difference lies in the nature of what is being explored. The focus shifts from external influence to internal transformation, from temporary effects to lasting change. This shift introduces a new level of commitment. The magic that follows does not simply alter outcomes. It reshapes the structure of identity itself, creating effects that extend beyond individual actions. The individual must engage with these possibilities fully, understanding both the method and the consequence. At this point, the progression has reached a stage where reversal becomes more difficult. The patterns established earlier are deeply integrated, influencing not only behavior, but perception. The individual operates within a framework that supports continued movement along the same path, making deviation less likely. This does not mean that change is impossible. The capacity for different choices remains, though it requires a conscious effort to break established patterns. Without such effort, the progression continues naturally, guided by the consistency of previous actions. The alignment between intention and magic, developed over each stage, remains central. It is this alignment that allows the individual to engage with more advanced forms of magic, shaping outcomes with increasing precision. As the scope of these outcomes expands, so too does the influence of the individual's choices. In this way, the breaking point of moral identity is not defined by a single action, but by the stability of the patterns that have formed. The individual has reached a point where their use of magic reflects a consistent perspective. one that prioritizes control and outcome above other considerations. This stability prepares the way for the next stage, where the focus moves beyond behavior into the structure of the self. The progression continues, guided by the same principles, but applied to forms of magic that extend deeper, altering not only what is done, but what remains. At this stage, the progression turns towards something less visible, yet more fundamental than anything encountered before. The focus is no longer limited to action, influence, or even identity in its outward form. It begins to involve the underlying structure that defines a person within the wizarding world. This structure is often described as the soul. In magical understanding, the soul is not treated as an abstract idea alone. It is considered a real and integral part of a person's existence, shaping thought, emotion, and continuity over time. While it cannot be seen directly, its presence is reflected in the way individuals act, in the consistency of their identity, and in the connections they form with others. It represents a form of wholeness, a stable core that remains even as external circumstances change. Within ordinary magical practice, the soul is not something that is altered or manipulated. Spells may affect the body, the mind, or the environment, but the underlying structure remains intact. This stability allows for recovery, for growth, and for the continuation of identity across different experiences. It provides a foundation upon which all other aspects of magic operate. However, within the study of deeper forms of dark magic, the existence of the soul introduces a different possibility. If it is real, then it can be affected. If it defines wholeness, then that wholeness can be disrupted. These ideas do not arise within standard education, but they exist within the preserved knowledge of more advanced magical theory. The concept of altering the soul represents a significant departure from earlier stages. It is not concerned with temporary effects or external control. It addresses the essence of the individual, the part that persists beyond physical form. Engaging with this concept requires a different level of intention, one that extends beyond immediate outcome into lasting transformation. Within this framework, the idea of fragmentation begins to take shape. Rather than viewing the soul as fixed and indivisible, it becomes possible to consider it as something that can be divided. This division is not natural. It does not occur through ordinary experience. It requires deliberate action, guided by knowledge and supported by intention. The act that enables such division is not arbitrary. It is tied to one of the most fundamental boundaries within the wizarding world, the taking of a life. This action creates a disruption, not only in the physical sense, but within the structure of the one who performs it. The soul, previously whole, is affected by the act, creating a point where it can be separated. This connection between action and structure reinforces the role of intention. The act itself is not sufficient. It must be carried out with awareness, aligned with the purpose of creating division. The result is a change that extends beyond the moment, altering the nature of the individual in a way that cannot be easily reversed. The idea of a divided soul introduces a new dimension to the progression of dark magic. Earlier stages involved control over others, influence over outcomes, and transformation of identity. This stage moves beyond those aspects, focusing on the internal structure that supports all of them. It represents a deeper level of engagement, one that reshapes the foundation upon which identity is built. Within the broader context of magical knowledge, this concept is rarely discussed openly. It exists within restricted texts, preserved but not taught, understood by few, and approached with caution. The reasons for this caution are not only ethical, but practical. Altering the soul introduces instability, affecting not only the individual, but the continuity of their existence. For those who pursue this knowledge, the process begins with understanding the nature of the soul, its role within identity, and the conditions under which it can be affected. are considered carefully. This understanding forms the basis for further action, guiding the individual toward methods that can achieve the desired result. The progression to this point has already established the necessary elements. The alignment between intention and action is clear. The ability to act without hesitation has been demonstrated. The focus required to sustain complex magical practice is in place. What remains is the application of these elements to a new domain, one that extends deeper than any encountered before. This stage does not yet involve the full realization of that process. It represents the threshold, the point at which the concept becomes clear and the possibility becomes real. The individual stands at the edge of a form of magic that alters not only what they do, but what they are. The awareness of this possibility influences how future decisions are made. The pursuit of permanence, introduced in earlier stages, now finds a potential path. If the soul can be divided, then aspects of the self can be separated from the whole. This separation opens the possibility of preserving those parts, extending existence in ways that were not previously considered. At the same time, the cost of such action becomes part of the understanding. The loss of wholeness introduces imbalance, affecting perception, emotion, and the continuity of identity. These effects are not always immediate, but they are inherent to the process. This dual nature, possibility and consequence, defines the stage. The individual must consider not only what can be achieved, but what will be altered in the process. The decision to move forward is shaped by the same patterns that have guided earlier progression, reinforced by the desire for control and permanence. In this way, the concept of the soul becomes central to the next phase of dark magic. It represents both the limit and the extension of what magic can do. It defines a boundary that, once crossed, changes the nature of the individual in ways that cannot be undone through ordinary means. The progression continues from this point, moving from understanding to application. The ideas explored here form the foundation for actions that will reshape identity at its core, marking a transition into a level of magic where the effects are no longer confined to the surface, but extend into the essence of existence itself. Once the concept of the soul becomes clear, the progression moves from understanding into method. The idea of division is no longer abstract. It begins to take form as a process, one that can be followed, repeated, and refined. This process leads to the creation of a Horcrux, an object that holds a separated fragment of the soul. The existence of such an object reflects a significant shift in the use of magic. Earlier stages focused on influencing others or shaping outcomes within the present. This stage moves beyond those limits, extending intention into something that persists independently. The soul, once considered whole and contained, is divided and placed outside the body, creating a new relationship between identity and existence. The method begins with an act that disrupts the natural state of the soul. The taking of a life creates a break, a point where division becomes possible. This act is not incidental. It must be carried out with awareness, aligned with the intention to separate a portion of the self. Without this alignment, the process cannot proceed as intended. Following this, the fragment must be guided into a vessel. The object chosen is not arbitrary. It is often selected for its significance, its durability, or its connection to the individual's sense of identity. The object becomes more than a container. It serves as an anchor, holding the fragment in a stable form that can exist independently of the original body. The act of placing the fragment into the object completes the process, creating the Horcrux. At this point, the individual is no longer whole. A portion of the soul exists separately, preserved within the object. The body continues to function, sustained by what remains, while the fragment exists beyond it, unaffected by changes to the physical form. This separation introduces a new kind of permanence. If the body is damaged or destroyed, the fragment within the Horcrux remains intact. It provides a form of continuity, allowing the individual to persist in a way that would not otherwise be possible. This outcome aligns with the earlier desire for permanence, offering a method through which it can be achieved. The creation of a single Horcrux represents a profound alteration, yet the process does not necessarily end there. The method can be repeated, dividing the soul further, creating multiple fragments. Each fragment is placed within a separate object, forming a network of anchors that extend the individual's existence across multiple points. This repetition increases the level of control over continuity. With multiple Horcruxes, the individual is no longer dependent on a single point of preservation. The destruction of one fragment does not end the process, as others remain. This redundancy reflects a calculated approach, one that aligns with the patterns established in earlier stages of progression. In the case of Tom Riddle, this approach is carried to its fullest extent. His exploration of Horcrux creation leads to the division of his soul into multiple parts, each contained within objects chosen for their symbolic and practical significance. The diary, the ring, the locket, the cup, the diadem, and the serpent each serve as vessels, forming a structure that supports his continued existence. The choice of these objects reflects more than practicality. It demonstrates the integration of identity into the process. Each item is connected to a specific aspect of his history or ambition, reinforcing the link between the fragment and the individual. The Horcrux becomes not only a container, but a representation of the self, extended into the world. This integration deepens the transformation. The individual is no longer contained within a single form. Their existence is distributed, shaped by the objects that hold their fragmented essence. The relationship between body and identity changes, becoming more complex and less dependent on physical continuity. At the same time, the division of the soul introduces instability. Each separation reduces the wholeness of the individual, affecting perception and experience. The remaining portion within the body becomes less complete, altering the way the individual relates to themselves and to others. This effect may not be immediately visible, but it is inherent to the process. The balance between preservation and fragmentation defines this stage. The creation of Horcruxes provides a means of extending existence, but it does so at the cost of unity. The individual gains continuity, but loses completeness. This trade becomes central to the progression, shaping how further actions are approached. The knowledge required to perform this process is not widely available. It exists within restricted texts, preserved but not taught openly. The complexity of the method, combined with its consequences, ensures that only those who actively seek it will engage with it. This limitation reflects the recognition that such magic carries effects that extend beyond ordinary practice. For the individual who reaches this stage, the process becomes a culmination of earlier patterns. The alignment between intention and action is fully realized. The focus on control and permanence finds its most direct expression. The use of magic is no longer limited to influencing the present. It extends into the structure of existence itself. This extension marks a significant transformation. The individual has moved beyond the boundaries of conventional magical practice, engaging with forms of magic that reshape identity at its core. The Horcrux becomes both a tool and a consequence, embodying the progression that has led to its creation. As this stage develops, the implications of such magic continue to unfold. The presence of multiple fragments influences behavior, perception, and interaction with the world. The individual operates within a structure that supports continuity, but also reflects the division that made it possible. The progression continues from this point, moving beyond the creation of Horcruxes into the experience of living with their effects. The focus shifts from method to consequence, from the act of division to the state that follows. The path forward remains guided by the same principles, shaped by intention, reinforced by action, and defined by the transformation that has already taken place. After the division has taken place, the effects do not remain confined to the objects that hold the fragments. They extend into the individual who performed the act, shaping the way they exist within the world. The body continues, the mind remains active, yet something fundamental has changed. The sense of wholeness that once defined identity is no longer present. At first, this change may not be fully understood. The process achieves its intended result, preserving a form of continuity beyond the physical self. The focus remains on that outcome, on the fact that existence has been extended. Yet beneath that success, the structure of the self has been altered in ways that continue to develop over time. The division of the soul creates imbalance. Each fragment removed reduces the completeness of what remains. The individual continues to function, but the connection between different aspects of identity becomes less stable. Thoughts may become more rigid, emotions more distant, and responses more controlled in ways that limit variation. This is not always immediate, but it becomes more apparent as the process continues. In the case of Tom Riddle, these effects are visible across time. His early presence reflects control and clarity, shaped by intention and discipline. As the division progresses, these qualities remain, but they are accompanied by changes that alter how he is perceived. His physical form becomes less reflective of a natural human state, shifting in ways that suggest the deeper transformations taking place within. This outward change mirrors the internal condition. The loss of wholeness affects not only how the individual appears, but how they experience themselves. The connection between thought and feeling becomes more limited, with certain aspects of emotion diminishing or disappearing entirely. The capacity for empathy, already reduced in earlier stages, becomes increasingly distant. This distance influences behavior. Actions are guided more by objective than by connection, shaped by the patterns established in previous stages. The individual continues to pursue control and permanence, but the way these goals are approached reflects the altered state of the self. Decisions become more calculated, less influenced by considerations that might introduce hesitation. The presence of multiple Horcruxes reinforces this state. Each fragment exists independently, yet remains tied to the whole. This distributed existence creates a structure where identity is no longer centralized. The individual is present in more than one place, defined not only by the body they inhabit, but by the objects that hold portions of their essence. This distribution introduces a different relationship with existence. The individual is no longer fully contained within a single form, and as a result, the concept of self becomes less immediate. The body becomes one part of a larger system, supported by fragments that exist elsewhere. This separation affects how the individual relates to their own presence, reducing the sense of continuity that once defined it. At the same time, the fragments themselves influence the environment around them. Objects containing parts of the soul may carry a presence, affecting those who come into contact with them. This presence reflects the nature of the fragment, shaped by the same patterns that define the individual. It extends the influence of the self beyond direct interaction, creating effects that persist even in absence. This extension reinforces the idea that the individual's existence is no longer limited to their physical form. The fragments act as points of continuity, maintaining the connection between identity and the world. Yet, this continuity comes at the cost of unity. The individual exists in multiple places, but not as a whole. The experience of living within this state becomes defined by this balance. The desire for permanence is achieved, but the nature of that permanence differs from what might have been expected. It is not a continuation of the original self, but a fragmented existence, supported by parts that no longer form a complete whole. Over time, this condition can lead to further instability. The more the soul is divided, the less stable the remaining portion becomes. The individual may become more dependent on the fragments, relying on their existence to maintain continuity. This dependence shapes behavior, influencing decisions and actions in ways that prioritize preservation above all else. This prioritization reflects the underlying intention that drove the progression to this point. The desire to extend existence has been fulfilled, but it requires ongoing maintenance. The fragments must remain intact, protected from destruction. The individual's actions become aligned with this need, reinforcing the patterns of control and influence that have been established. Within the broader structure of dark magic, this stage represents the lived experience of its most advanced forms. The process of division has been completed, and its effects are now integrated into the individual's existence. The magic is no longer something that is cast. It is something that defines the state of being. This definition influences how the individual interacts with the world. Relationships, decisions, and actions are all shaped by the altered structure of the self. The absence of wholeness affects perception, reducing the complexity of experience and reinforcing the focus on objective outcomes. The progression continues, moving from the state of fragmentation into the systems that support it. The presence of Horcruxes creates a framework, one that allows for continued existence despite the instability introduced by division. This framework becomes central to the individual's approach, guiding how they maintain and protect what has been created. In this way, living without wholeness becomes both a condition and a choice. It reflects the culmination of earlier stages, shaped by intention and reinforced through action. The individual exists within a structure they have created, one that extends beyond the self while redefining what the self has become. As the path moves forward, the focus shifts toward how this structure is maintained and used. The fragments, once created, become part of a larger system, one that supports continued existence and shapes the direction of future actions. The progression remains consistent, guided by the same principles, but applied to a state where the consequences are no longer temporary and the transformation is complete. As the state of fragmentation becomes established, the role of Horcruxes shifts from creation to function. They are no longer simply the result of a process. They become part of a system, one that supports continued existence through structure rather than singular form. Each fragment holds a portion of the self, and together they create a network that extends beyond the limits of the body. This system reflects a different approach to survival. In earlier stages, the focus was on control within the present, shaping outcomes through direct action. Here, the focus extends beyond immediate circumstances, addressing the possibility of loss and the means to persist beyond it. The Horcruxes serve as anchors, each one preserving a part of the individual that remains intact regardless of what happens to the rest. The placement of these fragments is not random. Each object is chosen with intention, often tied to significance or durability. Locations are selected to reduce the likelihood of discovery, creating layers of separation between the fragments and those who might seek to destroy them. This arrangement introduces a strategic dimension, where planning becomes essential to maintaining the system. In the case of Tom Riddle, this strategy is evident in the distribution of his Horcruxes. Each one is placed in a different environment, often protected by additional layers of magic. The diary is concealed within a setting that allows it to interact with others indirectly. The ring is hidden within a location tied to personal history. The locket is placed within a space guarded by complex enchantment. Each choice reflects a calculated effort to ensure that no single point of failure can disrupt the entire system. This redundancy strengthens the structure. The loss of one fragment does not end the individual's existence, as others remain. The system compensates for damage, allowing continuity to persist despite disruption. This approach mirrors earlier patterns of control, extended now into the domain of existence itself. At the same time, the system introduces a new form of dependency. The individual's continued existence becomes tied to the preservation of these fragments. Each Horcrux must remain intact for the system to function as intended. This requirement influences behavior, guiding actions toward the protection and maintenance of the network. This dependency creates a shift in focus. The individual must now consider not only their own actions, but the state of the fragments that sustain them. Decisions are made with awareness of potential threats, and measures are taken to reduce exposure. The system requires attention, reinforcing the connection between survival and control. The presence of multiple Horcruxes also affects perception. The individual is no longer centered in a single form. Their existence is distributed, with parts of their identity residing in different places. This distribution changes the relationship between self and world, creating a sense of separation that extends beyond physical boundaries. This separation can influence how the individual experiences continuity. The body becomes one part of a larger system, supported by fragments that exist independently. The sense of being whole is replaced by a structure where identity is maintained through connection rather than unity. Each fragment contributes to the overall existence, but none represents it completely. The system also introduces a form of resilience that differs from earlier stages. Physical damage to the body no longer carries the same finality. The presence of intact fragments allows for continuation, even in the absence of the original form. This resilience aligns with the earlier desire for permanence, providing a method through which it can be sustained. However, this resilience is not without limitation. The destruction of fragments reduces the stability of the system. Each loss brings the individual closer to a state where continuation is no longer possible. This gradual weakening creates a dynamic where the system must be maintained actively, reinforcing the need for control and protection. The interaction between fragments and the environment adds another layer to the system. Objects containing parts of the soul can influence those who come into contact with them, reflecting the nature of the individual within. This influence extends the reach of the system, allowing it to affect others even without direct action. This extension reinforces the integration of identity and magic. The fragments are not passive. They carry aspects of the self, shaping interactions and outcomes in subtle ways. The system becomes not only a means of survival, but a mechanism for continued influence. Within the broader progression of dark magic, this stage represents the establishment of a sustained structure. The earlier focus on individual actions has evolved into a network that operates continuously. The individual's existence is supported by this network, guided by the same principles of intention and control that defined earlier stages. The strategic nature of the system reflects the culmination of previous developments. Knowledge, focus, and practice are integrated into a cohesive approach, one that extends beyond immediate action into long-term planning. The use of magic becomes less about isolated events and more about maintaining a stable framework for existence. This framework influences how future actions are approached. The individual must consider the state of the system in every decision, ensuring that it remains intact. This constant awareness shapes behavior, reinforcing patterns of control and reducing the influence of external factors. At the same time, the system highlights the cost of the progression. The need to maintain multiple fragments reflects the instability introduced by their creation. The individual exists through a structure that compensates for division, rather than through a natural state of wholeness. This compensation defines the nature of their existence moving forward. The progression continues from this point, shifting from the construction of the system to its consequences. The presence of Horcruxes ensures continuation, but it also shapes the individual's relationship with the world. The path ahead is guided by this structure, moving toward outcomes that reflect both the power and the limitations of what has been created. As the progression continues beyond the individual, dark magic begins to extend into wider structures. What was once practiced in isolation or within small groups becomes part of something more organized. The focus shifts from personal control to collective influence. where magic is used to shape not only individual outcomes, but the behavior of entire communities. At this stage, the patterns established earlier find a new form. The desire for control, the reliance on intention, and the use of magic to achieve specific results are no longer confined to a single person. They are shared, reinforced, and expanded through coordinated action. This transition marks the movement from personal practice into systemic use. Within the wizarding world, this development is most clearly seen in the formation of groups that align around a common ideology. Among these, the Death Eaters represent a structure where dark magic becomes central to identity and purpose. Their actions are not random or isolated. They follow a pattern, guided by shared beliefs and directed toward a consistent objective. The ideology that supports this structure builds upon earlier influences. Ideas about power, hierarchy, and control are brought together into a unified perspective. Magic is no longer viewed simply as a tool. It becomes a means of establishing and maintaining dominance, reinforcing the belief that certain individuals or groups hold authority over others. This belief is not expressed only through words. It is enacted through behavior, where magic is used to impose that structure on the world. Spells that control, harm, or eliminate are applied not as isolated acts, but as part of a broader strategy. Each action contributes to the overall goal, shaping the environment in ways that reflect the underlying ideology. The use of fear becomes central to this approach. Earlier stages involved control over individuals, often within limited contexts. Now, that control is extended through the creation of uncertainty and threat. The presence of dark magic, combined with the knowledge of its effects, influences behavior even when it is not actively used. People respond to the possibility of harm, adjusting their actions to avoid it. This indirect influence allows for control without constant intervention. The system sustains itself through the awareness of its power. Those within it act to maintain its structure, while those outside it alter their behavior in response. Magic becomes both the means and the symbol of this control, reinforcing its presence at every level. The role of leadership becomes significant in this context. A central figure directs the actions of the group, aligning individual efforts with the broader objective. In the case of the Death Eaters, this role is held by Voldemort, whose influence shapes both the structure and the direction of the system. His use of dark magic sets the standard, guiding how others within the group apply their own abilities. This leadership creates consistency, ensuring that the use of magic follows a coherent pattern. The actions of the group are not left to chance. They are coordinated, with each member contributing to the overall effect. This coordination increases the reach of dark magic, allowing it to influence areas beyond the immediate presence of any single individual. At the same time, the system introduces a form of hierarchy. Not all members hold equal status. Position is often determined by loyalty, capability, and alignment with the central ideology. Magic becomes a means of reinforcing this hierarchy, with more powerful or trusted individuals granted greater authority. This structure mirrors earlier stages, where control over others defined the progression. Now, that control is organized, applied within a framework that extends beyond personal interaction. The individual becomes part of a larger system, their actions contributing to a collective outcome. The integration of dark magic into this system affects how it is perceived. What was once considered forbidden or restricted becomes normalized within the group. The use of harmful spells is no longer an exception. It is expected, reinforced through repeated action and shared belief. This normalization changes the role of intention. Earlier, the alignment between thought and action was a personal process. Now, it is supported by the surrounding structure. The individual's intention is reinforced by the expectations of the group, making it easier to maintain consistency in behavior. The system also influences how resistance is approached. Those who oppose it are not seen as individuals with differing perspectives. They become obstacles to be managed or removed. This perspective reduces the complexity of interaction, aligning responses with the goals of the system rather than with individual consideration. Within this framework, the use of dark magic becomes part of a broader strategy. It is applied where it is most effective. Guided by the objectives of the group, each action contributes to the overall structure, reinforcing its presence and extending its influence. The progression to this stage reflects the accumulation of earlier developments. The alignment between intention and action, the use of magic for control, and the transformation of identity all contribute to the formation of this system. What began as individual practice has evolved into a collective force, shaped by shared purpose and sustained through coordinated use of magic. As this stage develops, the effects of the system become more visible. The influence of dark magic extends into institutions, communities, and daily life. The boundaries between individual action and systemic control begin to blur, creating an environment where magic is used not only to shape outcomes, but to define the structure within which those outcomes occur. The progression continues, moving from organized groups into the institutions that govern the wizarding world. The same principles apply, but on a larger scale, where control is exercised through established systems rather than through direct action alone. As the influence of dark magic extends beyond individuals and organized groups, it begins to reach into the structures that govern the wizarding world. What was once applied through direct action now finds its way into systems that shape law, communication, and daily life. The focus shifts again from coordinated effort to institutional presence. The Ministry of Magic exists as the central authority within this structure. It defines laws, enforces boundaries, and maintains order across the wizarding community. Under ordinary conditions, its role is to regulate magic in a way that balances freedom with protection. Its systems are designed to respond to threats, to manage risk, and to preserve stability. At this stage of progression, those systems become a point of influence. Rather than operating outside the established framework, dark magic begins to move within it. The goal is no longer only to control individuals or groups, but to shape the structures that guide them. This approach allows for a broader and more sustained form of control. The method of influence differs from earlier stages. Direct confrontation is not always necessary. Instead, subtle forms of manipulation are applied, often through spells that affect perception, memory, or decision. The imperious curse becomes particularly significant in this context, allowing individuals within positions of authority to be guided without visible change. When applied within the ministry, this form of control creates a shift that is not immediately apparent. Officials continue their duties, decisions are made, and processes remain in place. Yet the source of those decisions has changed. Actions are no longer guided solely by internal judgment, but by external influence that remains hidden. This hidden influence allows the system to function while being altered from within. Laws may be adjusted, enforcement redirected, and information managed in ways that align with the objectives of those applying the control. The outward appearance of stability remains, but the underlying structure begins to shift. The use of memory-altering magic also plays a role in this process. Events can be reshaped, details removed or altered, creating a version of reality that supports the desired outcome. This manipulation of information reinforces the control established through other means, ensuring that resistance is limited by uncertainty or incomplete understanding. Over time, these changes accumulate. The ministry, once a stabilizing force, begins to reflect the influence of dark magic in its actions. Decisions that would have been questioned before are accepted, not because they align with previous standards, but because the framework through which they are evaluated has changed. This transformation affects how individuals within the system perceive their roles. Those under direct influence act without awareness of the change, carrying out tasks as though they were their own decisions. Others, not directly controlled, may adjust their behavior in response to the shifting environment, aligning themselves with the emerging pattern to maintain position or avoid consequence. The distinction between voluntary and imposed action becomes less clear in this environment. The system continues to operate, but the motivations behind its actions are no longer transparent. This ambiguity reinforces the overall control, as it reduces the ability to identify and challenge the source of influence. The presence of dark magic within an institution also alters how it is perceived by the wider community. Trust, which once formed the basis of its authority, begins to weaken. Yet this weakening does not always lead to immediate resistance. The combination of fear, uncertainty, and controlled information can delay response, allowing the influence to deepen. At this level, control is no longer maintained through constant action. It is sustained through the structure itself. Once key positions are influenced, the system begins to reinforce the desired outcomes on its own. Decisions made within the framework continue to align with the underlying objective, even without direct intervention. This self-reinforcing nature marks a significant development in the progression of dark magic. The influence has moved from individual practice to systemic integration, shaping the environment in which all other actions occur. The individual is no longer the primary focus. The system becomes the medium through which control is exercised. The strategic nature of this approach reflects the culmination of earlier patterns. Knowledge, control, and influence are applied at a larger scale, guided by the same principles, but adapted to a more complex structure. The use of magic becomes less visible, yet more pervasive, affecting outcomes across multiple levels of the wizarding world. The consequences of this stage extend beyond the immediate actions taken. They alter the conditions under which future actions occur, shaping the environment in ways that persist over time. The progression continues, moving from institutional influence into the spaces where knowledge is formed and passed on, where the next generation is shaped by the conditions created. As the influence of dark magic settles into institutions, it does not remain confined to places of governance. It extends into spaces where knowledge is formed and passed on, where habits are shaped, and where understanding takes its earliest structured form. Hogwarts, once defined by its role as a place of learning and balance, begins to reflect these broader changes. The castle itself remains unchanged in appearance. The same corridors stretch between towers, the same classrooms hold their lessons, and the routines of daily life continue. Yet beneath this continuity, the purpose of the institution begins to shift. The environment that once encouraged exploration and discipline now becomes shaped by a different set of priorities. This transformation is most visible in the way instruction is delivered. Subjects that once focused on protection and understanding are altered, their content adjusted to reflect the presence of control rather than defense. The teaching of magic no longer emphasizes restraint or responsibility in the same way. Instead, it begins to mirror the patterns established outside the school, reinforcing the use of power over others. The Caro siblings, appointed during this period, represent this change in direct form. Their approach to teaching is not based on guidance or development, but on enforcement. Lessons become structured around the application of harmful magic, not as a concept to be understood, but as a practice to be repeated. Students are required to participate, their actions shaped by expectation rather than choice. This requirement introduces a new dynamic into the learning environment. Magic is no longer presented as a skill to be refined within clear boundaries. It becomes a means of demonstrating alignment with the prevailing structure. Participation is not optional, and refusal carries consequence. The classroom shifts from a place of learning to a space of compliance. Within this environment, the use of fear becomes central. Earlier stages introduced fear as a tool for influence, applied in specific situations. Now, it becomes part of the daily experience. The possibility of punishment, the presence of authority, and the expectation of participation create a constant awareness that shapes behavior. Students respond not only to direct instruction, but to the conditions that surround it. This response varies among individuals. Some adapt quickly, aligning their actions with the expectations placed upon them. Others resist, either openly or quietly, maintaining a different perspective despite the pressure. This variation reflects the complexity of the environment, where the same conditions produce different outcomes depending on the individual. For those who adapt, the repeated use of harmful magic becomes normalized. What was once considered beyond acceptable use is now part of routine. The act of casting such spells loses its distinction, integrated into the structure of daily lessons. The boundary between learning and application fades, replaced by a continuous pattern of use. For those who resist, the environment creates a different experience. The presence of enforced magic introduces conflict between internal understanding and external expectation. This conflict may not always be visible, but it shapes how the individual engages with the system. Their actions are influenced by the need to navigate these conditions while maintaining their perspective. The overall effect of this transformation is a shift in how magic is perceived by the student. The principles taught in earlier years, focused on balance and responsibility, are overshadowed by the immediate demands of the environment. The meaning of magic becomes tied to its use within the system, rather than to its broader role within the wizarding world. This shift has lasting implications. The experiences formed during this period influence how individuals understand magic moving forward. The normalization of harmful spells, the presence of enforced control, and the integration of fear into daily life all contribute to a changed perspective. These patterns may persist even after the environment itself changes. At the same time, the presence of this system within Hogwarts highlights the extent to which dark magic has extended. It is no longer limited to individuals or external institutions. It has entered the core of education, shaping the development of those who will carry that knowledge into the future. The influence is both immediate and generational, affecting not only current actions, but future understanding. The castle, once a place of relative stability, becomes a reflection of the broader structure. Its routines continue, but their purpose has been altered. The same spaces now serve a different function, reinforcing patterns that align with the progression of dark magic rather than with its restraint. This stage represents a deep integration of influence. The progression has moved from personal practice to systemic control, and now into the formation of knowledge itself. The individual is shaped not only by their own actions, but by the environment in which they learn and grow. The effects of this integration extend beyond the immediate period. They influence how magic is understood, how it is applied, and how it is perceived within the wider community. The patterns established here become part of the larger structure, contributing to the ongoing progression. As the path continues, the focus shifts once more. The presence of dark magic within education and institutions creates conditions where its influence becomes widely accepted. The next stage reflects this acceptance, where the distinction between normal and abnormal use begins to fade, and the system sustains itself through the behavior of those within it. As the system settles into place, its presence becomes less noticeable to those within it. What once felt unfamiliar begins to appear consistent, and what once carried a sense of disruption becomes part of the expected order. The use of dark magic, introduced gradually and reinforced through structure, begins to blend into the patterns of daily life. This stage is defined by normalization. The behaviors that were once considered exceptions are now repeated without distinction. Actions that would have drawn attention in earlier contexts are carried out with little reaction. The environment adjusts, not through a single shift, but through the accumulation of small changes that alter perception over time. Within this environment, individuals begin to adapt in different ways. Some accept the conditions fully, aligning their actions with the system without hesitation. Others adjust more gradually, modifying their behavior to fit the expectations while maintaining a quieter awareness of the change. In both cases, the result is similar. The system continues to function, supported by the responses of those within it. The presence of fear remains, but its role changes. In earlier stages, fear was immediate and visible, influencing behavior through direct threat. Now, it becomes more subtle, integrated into the background of experience. It shapes decisions not through constant confrontation, but through the understanding that deviation carries consequence. This understanding becomes internalized, guiding action without the need for repeated reinforcement. As this internalization develops, the distinction between choice and expectation becomes less clear. Actions are taken because they align with the established pattern, not necessarily because they are consciously selected. The individual moves through the environment with a sense of continuity, following the structure that has been set in place. This continuity affects how magic is used. Harmful spells, once marked by their difference, are now applied with the same familiarity as other forms of magic. The act of casting them does not carry the same weight it once did. It becomes part of routine, integrated into behavior in a way that reduces its significance. The repetition of these actions reinforces the normalization. Each instance contributes to the overall pattern, making it more stable and less likely to be questioned. Over time, the original boundaries that defined acceptable use of magic become distant, replaced by the immediate conditions of the environment. This process extends beyond individual behavior into the perception of the system itself. The structure that supports the use of dark magic is no longer seen as temporary or imposed. It becomes part of the expected order, shaping how the world is understood. The presence of control, influence, and harm is interpreted as a natural aspect of the environment rather than as a deviation from it. Within this context, resistance becomes more difficult. The normalization of behavior reduces the visibility of change, making it harder to identify what has shifted. Without a clear point of comparison, the individual may struggle to recognize the extent of the transformation. The system sustains itself through this lack of distinction, maintaining its structure without requiring constant reinforcement. At the same time, the effects of normalization are not uniform. There remain individuals who perceive the difference, who recognize that the current conditions do not align with earlier understanding. Their response may vary from quiet observation to active resistance, but they exist within the same environment, shaped by the same conditions. The presence of these differing responses highlights the complexity of this stage. It creates a dominant pattern, one that influences behavior broadly, while still allowing for individual differences in perception and action. The system remains stable, supported by the majority, even as some continue to question it. The broader impact of this stage is the establishment of a sustained state. The progression has moved from individual action to systemic integration, and now to a condition where that system operates with minimal disruption. It is part of the ongoing structure, influencing outcomes continuously. This sustained state prepares the way for what follows. The system, now normalized, becomes more vulnerable to shifts that challenge its foundation. The patterns that support it are stable, but they are not unchangeable. The next stage reflects the limits of this structure, where the effects of dark magic encounter resistance that alters its course. In this way, normalization represents both a consolidation and a transition. It solidifies the patterns that have developed, embedding them within the environment, while also setting the conditions for their eventual disruption. The progression continues, guided by the same principles, but moving toward a point where the system must respond to forces that exist beyond its control. As the system reaches its most stable form, its limits begin to appear. The structures built through dark magic extend control, preserve existence, and shape behavior across individuals and institutions. Yet within that expansion, there are boundaries that cannot be crossed, no matter how complete the alignment between intention and action becomes. One of these limits lies in the nature of creation. Magic can transform, alter, and sustain, but it does not generate life in the same way that natural processes do. Even the most advanced forms of dark magic rely on existing structures, reshaping what is already present rather than producing something entirely new. This distinction remains constant, regardless of the level of control achieved. The desire for permanence, introduced in earlier stages, finds partial fulfillment through systems like Horcruxes. Existence can be extended, preserved beyond the limits of the body. Yet, this extension does not restore wholeness. It maintains continuity, but through fragmentation. The individual persists, but not in the same form as before. The system compensates for loss, rather than overcoming it completely. This limitation reflects a deeper principle within magic itself. Power can shape outcomes, but it does not remove the conditions that define those outcomes. The use of dark magic can delay, redirect, or distribute consequence, but it cannot eliminate it entirely. Each action carries an effect that becomes part of the structure moving forward. In the case of Voldemort, this principle is evident in the relationship between his pursuit of immortality and the state it produces. His existence continues through the preservation of his soul fragments, yet his physical form becomes increasingly unstable. The body, no longer supported by a complete soul, reflects the imbalance created by division. The result is a state that persists, but not without cost. This imbalance extends beyond the physical. The fragmentation of the soul influences perception, limiting the range of experience and reducing the connection between thought and feeling. The individual remains focused on control and continuation, but the capacity for other forms of understanding diminishes. This reduction is not accidental. It is inherent to the process that enabled the preservation in the first place. Another limitation appears in the relationship between control and independence. Dark magic allows for influence over others, whether through direct spells or systemic structures. Yet this control is not absolute in all cases. Resistance remains possible, whether through strength of will, protective magic, or the presence of forces that operate outside the system. This resistance introduces unpredictability. Even within a highly controlled environment, there are elements that cannot be fully managed. Individuals may act in ways that do not align with the imposed structure. Events may unfold beyond the reach of direct influence. These variations highlight the boundaries of control, demonstrating that it cannot be extended indefinitely without encountering opposition. The reliance on systems such as Horcruxes also introduces a form of vulnerability. While they provide continuity, they must be maintained. Each fragment exists within a specific location, subject to the conditions of that environment. The destruction of a fragment weakens the overall structure, reducing the stability it was designed to preserve. This vulnerability contrasts with the goal of permanence. The system achieves persistence, but it does so through multiple points that require protection. The more extensive the system becomes, the more complex its maintenance. Each element adds to the overall strength, but also to the potential for disruption. Within the broader structure of dark magic, these limitations define the boundary between what can be achieved and what remains beyond reach. They do not negate the effects of earlier stages. Control, influence, and preservation remain effective within their scope. These constraints shape the direction of the progression. The individual, having reached this level, must navigate a system that is both powerful and incomplete. The desire for absolute control encounters conditions that cannot be fully resolved through magic alone. The presence of these conditions introduces a form of tension within the structure. This tension is not always visible, but it influences how the system responds to change. The stability achieved through normalization and systemic control begins to show points where it can be challenged. The boundaries of magic, once approached, become areas where other forms of influence can emerge. The recognition of these limits does not necessarily alter behavior immediately. The patterns established in earlier stages remain in place, guiding action through intention and control. However, the presence of limitation creates the possibility for change, opening the path for forces that operate outside the established system. In this way, the limits of dark magic represent both an endpoint and a transition. They define the maximum extent of control and preservation achievable through these methods, while also indicating where that control begins to weaken. The progression continues beyond this point, shaped not only by what dark magic can do, but by what it cannot sustain indefinitely. As the structure of dark magic approaches its limits, the effects of fragmentation begin to gather in more visible ways. The system that once provided stability through division now reveals the cost of that division more clearly. Each fragment preserved has reduced the wholeness of what remains, and over time, that reduction begins to influence not only perception, but the ability to maintain control. The individual who once operated with precision and consistency may find that their actions are shaped by the imbalance created through repeated division. The alignment between intention and outcome remains, but it is no longer supported by a complete foundation. The connection between different aspects of identity becomes less stable, creating a state where focus is maintained through effort rather than through natural continuity. In the case of Voldemort, this effect is evident in the progression of his existence. His earlier actions reflect clarity and calculation, each decision aligned with a specific objective. As the fragmentation increases, these qualities remain present, but they are accompanied by changes that alter how they function. The reliance on control becomes more pronounced, while the ability to adapt becomes more limited. This limitation is not always immediate. The system of Horcruxes continues to provide continuity, allowing the individual to persist despite the instability within. Yet as fragments are lost, the structure begins to weaken. Each destruction reduces the number of anchors that sustain existence, bringing the individual closer to a state where continuation depends on what remains. The loss of a fragment does more than reduce the system's redundancy. It alters the balance of the self. The portion that was preserved within the object is removed entirely, leaving the remaining structure further diminished. This reduction affects both the stability of the system and the nature of the individual who depends on it. As this process continues, the individual becomes more reliant on what remains. The need to protect the remaining fragments intensifies, shaping decisions in ways that prioritize preservation above all else. Actions are taken to maintain control, to prevent further loss, and to reinforce the system that supports continued existence. This increasing reliance creates a narrowing of focus. The individual's attention becomes centered on the maintenance of the system, reducing the ability to respond to other factors. The patterns established earlier, which allowed for adaptation and strategic planning, become more rigid. The range of possible actions narrows, guided by the need to protect what remains. At the same time, the presence of opposition becomes more significant. Earlier stages involved control over individuals and systems, often with limited resistance. As the system weakens, the ability to maintain that control diminishes. Others begin to act outside its influence, introducing variables that cannot be fully managed. This interaction between weakening structure and increasing resistance creates a shift in how outcomes are determined. The individual can no longer rely solely on established patterns. The effectiveness of control decreases, while the influence of external factors increases. This change reflects the limits encountered in the previous stage, now expressed through the state of the system itself. The fragmentation that once provided continuity now contributes to vulnerability. The division of the soul has extended existence, but it has also reduced the capacity for stability. The individual operates within a structure that requires constant maintenance, yet cannot be fully secured against all forms of disruption. This condition influences perception as well. the connection between thought and reality becomes more constrained, shaped by the limitations of the system. The individual may continue to act with intention, but the outcomes are no longer entirely within their control. The alignment between action and result, once consistent, begins to show variation. The cumulative effect of these changes leads to a point where the system can no longer sustain itself in the same way. The remaining fragments provide continuity, but not strength. The individual persists, but in a state that is increasingly dependent on conditions that cannot be guaranteed. This stage represents the cost of extending dark magic beyond its natural limits. The pursuit of permanence has been achieved through division, but that division has introduced instability that cannot be fully resolved. The system reflects both the success and the limitation of the progression, embodying the consequences of the choices that created it. As the structure continues to weaken, the balance between control and vulnerability shifts further. The individual must operate within a framework that no longer guarantees consistent outcomes. The reliance on dark magic remains, but its effectiveness is influenced by factors beyond direct control. The progression moves forward from this point, shaped by the interaction between what has been created and what remains beyond it. The system, once stable, now exists in a state where its continuation depends on conditions that are no longer fully within the individual's influence. This shift prepares the way for the next stage, where opposing forces begin to redefine the outcome of the entire structure. As the structure of dark magic begins to weaken under its own limitations, another form of magic becomes more visible in contrast. It does not rely on control, division, or the extension of power through force. Instead, it operates through connection, often unnoticed until it alters the outcome in ways that cannot be explained by conventional means. This form of magic is not taught in the same way as spells or techniques. It does not appear in structured lessons with clear incantations or wand movements. It emerges through action, shaped by intention that is not directed toward control, but toward protection. Its presence is often quiet, yet its effect can extend further than more visible forms of magic. One of the clearest examples of this appears in the protection created by Lily Potter. Her decision to place herself between danger and her child was not a calculated use of magic. It was an act defined by choice, made without expectation of return. In that moment, her intention shaped the outcome in a way that altered the structure of what followed. The result of this action was not immediate destruction or control, but a form of protection that remained beyond the moment itself. The connection between intention and effect operated differently here, not through force, but through a condition that prevented harm. This condition persisted, influencing events long after the original act had passed. This type of magic does not align with the patterns established in earlier stages. It does not require repetition, nor does it depend on the fragmentation of the self. It remains whole, reflecting the completeness of the intention behind it. Where dark magic divides, this form preserves, maintaining a connection that cannot be reduced or separated. The presence of such magic introduces a counterbalance to the progression. It exists outside the system of control, unaffected by the structures that support it. Attempts to overcome it through force do not succeed, as its nature does not respond to the same methods. It operates on a different principle, one that does not rely on domination or influence. This distinction becomes significant as the progression of dark magic reaches its later stages. The systems built through control and fragmentation encounter conditions that cannot be altered through those same methods. The presence of protective magic introduces a boundary, one that limits the effectiveness of dark magic despite its complexity. The interaction between these forms of magic reveals a contrast in their foundations. Dark magic is structured through intention directed outward, shaping others and the environment. Protective magic is structured through intention directed inward, reflecting a state that does not seek to control, but to preserve. This difference defines how each operates, and how they interact. For the individual who has progressed through the earlier stages, this contrast may not be immediately understood. The patterns of control and influence remain central, guiding how situations are approached. Yet when these patterns encounter a form of magic that does not respond in the expected way, the limitations of those patterns become clear. This clarity does not necessarily change behavior immediately. The established framework continues to guide action, supported by the structures that have been built. However, the presence of an opposing force that cannot be controlled introduces uncertainty, creating conditions where outcomes are no longer fully determined by intention alone. Within the broader context of the wizarding world, this interaction shapes the direction of events. The systems established through dark magic encounter resistance, not only from individuals, but from the principles that govern different forms of magic. This resistance does not always appear as direct opposition. It may operate quietly, influencing outcomes in ways that are not immediately visible. The significance of this stage lies in the shift it introduces. The progression of dark magic, which once moved steadily through increasing levels of control and complexity, now encounters a form of magic that alters its course. The path is no longer defined solely by the actions of the individual, but by the interaction between opposing principles. This interaction prepares the way for the next phase, where the structures built through dark magic begin to break down under the influence of forces that operate beyond them. The balance between control and resistance shifts, creating conditions where the outcome is shaped by more than the system itself. In this way, the presence of protective magic represents both a contrast and a turning point. It does not follow the same progression, yet it influences it in fundamental ways. It reveals that the structure of magic extends beyond the limits of control, and that the path forward is shaped by forces that cannot be fully contained within a single system. As the balance begins to shift, the systems built through dark magic no longer hold with the same consistency. What once appeared stable, supported by control and reinforced through repetition, starts to show signs of strain. The structures that shape behavior and maintained influence encounter conditions they were not designed to sustain. This change does not occur all at once. It develops through a series of disruptions, each one small in isolation, but significant when combined. Individuals who once acted within the system begin to move outside it, guided by awareness that had been suppressed or overlooked. Actions that aligned with the established pattern are questioned, and in some cases, resisted. The presence of resistance alters the environment. Control, which once extended smoothly through individuals and institutions, now meets opposition that cannot be fully contained. Spells that once ensured compliance become less effective when applied to those who no longer accept the conditions imposed upon them. The system begins to lose its uniformity, replaced by a more varied and uncertain structure. Within this shifting environment, the influence of dark magic becomes less predictable. The patterns that supported it remain in place, but they no longer produce consistent outcomes. The alignment between intention and effect, which defined earlier stages, begins to show variation as external factors influence the result. The collapse of the system is not marked by a single event. It is the result of accumulated change, where each disruption weakens the overall structure. The reliance on control becomes a limitation, as it cannot adapt quickly to conditions that require flexibility. The system, designed to maintain order through influence, struggles to respond to actions that originate outside its framework. The role of leadership also changes during this process. The central figure who once directed the system continues to act with the same intention, but the effectiveness of those actions is reduced. The connection between command and outcome weakens as the environment becomes less responsive to control. Authority remains, but its influence diminishes. At the same time, the structures within institutions begin to shift. Decisions that once aligned with the system are replaced by actions that reflect a different direction. The presence of individuals no longer under direct influence introduces variability into processes that were once consistent. The system becomes fragmented, mirroring the state of the individual who created it. This fragmentation extends into the broader community. The normalization that once sustained the system begins to dissolve, replaced by a renewed awareness of difference. Actions that were accepted as part of daily life are now recognized as part of a larger pattern that is no longer supported. The environment adjusts, reflecting the change in perception. As the collapse continues, the influence of dark magic becomes more concentrated. Instead of extending across a wide structure, it is applied in more direct and immediate ways. This concentration reflects the loss of systemic control, where influence must be exerted through action rather than maintained through structure. This shift further reduces the stability of the system. Without the support of institutions and widespread normalization, each use of dark magic becomes more isolated. The connection between individual action and broader outcome weakens, limiting the overall effectiveness of the approach. The cumulative effect of these changes leads to a point where the system can no longer sustain itself. The patterns that defined it remain, but they are no longer reinforced by the environment. The structures that once supported control have shifted, and the influence that sustained them has diminished. Within this context, the collapse is both structural and perceptual. The system loses its ability to shape behavior consistently, and individuals begin to act according to different principles. The environment, once defined by control, becomes more open, allowing for a range of actions that were previously restricted. This transition marks the end of the system as it existed. The progression of dark magic, which moved from individual practice to systemic integration, now reaches a point where that integration can no longer be maintained. The structures that supported it have changed, and the conditions that allowed it to persist are no longer present. The path forward continues from this point, shaped by the effects of the collapse. The patterns established earlier do not disappear entirely, but they are no longer dominant. The environment reflects a new balance, one that incorporates the lessons of the progression while allowing for different outcomes to emerge. In this way, the fall of the system represents both an end and a transition. It concludes the stage where dark magic defined the structure of the world, while opening the possibility for that structure to be reshaped. The progression moves forward, guided by the consequences of what has come before and the conditions that now define what follows. After the collapse, the environment does not return immediately to what it once was. The structures that supported control have been altered, but their effects remain. The patterns formed over time do not disappear with the system that created them. They persist in quieter ways, shaping how individuals move forward within the changed world. The first change is often a reduction in immediate pressure. The presence of constant control, once integrated into daily life, begins to recede. Actions are no longer guided by the same expectations, and the need to align with the previous structure diminishes. This creates space, allowing individuals to act with greater independence than before. Within this space, the effects of earlier stages become more visible. Experiences that were once normalized are reconsidered, viewed from a different perspective. The use of harmful magic, the influence of fear, and the patterns of control are no longer part of the current structure, yet they remain present in memory. These memories shape how individuals understand what has occurred. For some, this understanding leads to reflection. The patterns that guided behavior are examined, and their impact is considered. Actions that once felt routine may now appear different when viewed outside the system that supported them. This process does not follow a single path. It varies from one individual to another, influenced by experience and perspective. For others, the transition is more gradual. The absence of the system removes external reinforcement, but internal patterns may persist. Habits formed over time continue to influence behavior, even when the conditions that created them are no longer present. This persistence reflects the depth of the earlier progression, where repetition established consistent ways of acting. Hogwarts itself reflects this stage of transition. The castle remains, its structure unchanged, but its purpose begins to return to its original form. Classrooms reopen under different guidance, and the approach to teaching shifts once more. The emphasis moves away from enforcement and back toward understanding, restoring elements that were altered during the previous stage. This restoration does not erase what occurred. The environment carries traces of its recent past, visible in the way individuals interact and in the adjustments made to re-establish balance. The process of rebuilding involves both returning to earlier principles and addressing the effects that remain. Within the broader wizarding world, similar patterns emerge. Institutions that were influenced by dark magic begin to re-establish their roles, guided by a renewed focus on stability and protection. Laws are reinforced, and structures are adjusted to reduce the likelihood of similar influence in the future. This process reflects an awareness of what has been lost and what must be restored. The presence of trauma becomes part of this stage. Experiences shaped by fear and control leave lasting impressions, influencing how individuals perceive and respond to their environment. These effects are not always visible, but they contribute to the overall condition of the world as it moves forward. At the same time, the collapse of the system allows for the re-emergence of variation. Individuals are no longer bound by a single structure, and their actions begin to reflect a wider range of perspectives. This variation introduces a different kind of balance, one that is not defined by uniform control, but by the coexistence of multiple approaches. The use of magic also changes in this context. Harmful spells, once normalized, are no longer part of routine. Their use becomes less frequent, returning to the status they held before the progression reached its later stages. The distinction between acceptable and unacceptable use of magic becomes clearer once more, supported by both structure and shared understanding. This clarity does not eliminate the knowledge gained during earlier stages. The understanding of dark magic remains, preserved as part of the broader system of magical knowledge. What changes is how that knowledge is applied. The emphasis shifts from use to awareness, ensuring that it can be recognized without being integrated into daily behavior. The relationship between individuals and magic continues to evolve. The patterns established during the progression influence how magic is understood, but they are now balanced by the conditions of the present. The alignment between intention and action remains central, but it is guided by a different set of principles. As the world adjusts, the effects of dark magic become part of its history rather than its structure. The events that occurred are not forgotten, but they no longer define the current environment. This shift allows for a different kind of progression, one that builds upon the lessons of the past while moving in a new direction. The path forward is shaped by this combination of memory and change. The patterns that once sustained the system are replaced by structures that aim to prevent its return, while still acknowledging the complexity of magic itself. The world continues, influenced by what has come before, but not bound by it. In this way, what remains after dark magic is not the system itself, but the understanding it created. The progression has left its mark, shaping perception, behavior, and knowledge. These elements persist, forming part of the foundation upon which the future is built, even as the structure that produced them has faded. When the progression is viewed from a distance, it does not appear as a series of separate events. It forms a continuous pattern, one that moves gradually from small choices to lasting consequences. Each stage builds upon the last, not through sudden change, but through repetition and alignment. The structure that emerges reflects the accumulation of intention over time. The earliest moments are often quiet, a spell used for advantage, a decision shaped by control, a response guided by emotion rather than reflection. These actions do not stand out on their own. They are part of ordinary experience, easily overlooked within the flow of daily life. Yet they establish a direction, one that continues as similar choices are made again and again. As the pattern develops, knowledge expands. The understanding of magic deepens, revealing possibilities that were not previously considered. Each discovery adds to the structure, providing new ways to shape outcomes. The individual moves forward, guided by what has been learned, applying it with increasing consistency. This consistency leads to practice. What was once uncertain becomes familiar, repeated until it forms part of behavior. The use of magic becomes more deliberate, aligned with specific goals. The connection between intention and action strengthens, reducing hesitation and increasing precision. Each successful outcome reinforces the pattern, making it more stable. With stability comes integration. The use of magic is no longer separate from identity. It becomes part of how the individual understands themselves and their place within the world. Decisions are made within this framework, shaped by the patterns that have already been established. The progression continues, supported by the consistency of these choices. As the stages advance, the focus shifts outward and inward at the same time. Control over others expands, while the nature of the self begins to change. The boundaries that once defined identity become less fixed, influenced by the use of magic in ways that extend beyond immediate action. The individual moves deeper into a structure where each choice affects not only the present, but the underlying form of existence. This movement leads to fragmentation. The desire for permanence introduces methods that divide rather than preserve. The system created to extend existence reflects both the intention behind it and the cost it carries. The individual continues, but not as they once were. The pattern remains, but it is altered by the process that sustains it. As the structure expands, it moves beyond the individual. It becomes part of a wider system, shaping groups, institutions, and environment. The patterns that guided personal action are applied on a larger scale, creating a framework that influences many. This framework stabilizes through repetition, becoming part of the expected order, yet within this stability, limits remain. The system cannot extend indefinitely without encountering conditions that alter its course. The boundaries of magic, the presence of resistance, and the effects of fragmentation all contribute to a shift. The structure that once appeared complete begins to change, influenced by factors that lie outside its control. The collapse that follows is not separate from the pattern, it is part of it. Each stage leads naturally to the next, including the point where the system can no longer sustain itself. The progression reaches a balance where the forces that built it are met by forces that reshape it. The result is a transition where the structure gives way to a different state. After this transition, the pattern remains as memory and understanding. The actions that formed it continue to influence how magic is perceived and used. The progression does not disappear. It becomes part of the foundation upon which new patterns are built. The lessons it carries shape the direction of what follows. When viewed in its entirety, the progression reveals a simple structure beneath its complexity. It begins with intention, develops through repetition, and extends through alignment. Each stage reflects these elements, applied in different ways as the scope of action expands. The outcome is not defined by a single decision, but by the continuity of many. In this way, the pattern beneath dark magic is not sudden or isolated. It is gradual, consistent, and shaped by choice. Each moment contributes to its form, guiding the path from beginning to end. And as that path becomes clear, it offers a quiet understanding of how even the smallest decisions can shape what comes next. Dark magic does not arrive as a single moment. It unfolds slowly, shaped by intention, guided by repetition, and reinforced through each choice that follows. What begins as something small, almost unnoticed, gathers over time, forming patterns that become part of how the world is understood and shaped. Each level reflects this movement. Control becomes a habit, knowledge becomes direction, action becomes structure, and structure, once established, carries forward until it meets the limits that define it. Nothing within the progression stands alone. Each part exists because of what came before it. When the pattern settles, what remains is not only the result, but the understanding of how it formed. The path reveals itself as a series of decisions, each one connected, each one shaping the next. There is no single point where everything changes. There is only the quiet continuation of what has already begun. As the world returns to stillness, the pattern fades into the background, becoming part of memory rather than presence. And in that quiet, the structure of what was remains clear, not as something distant, but as something that moved step by step until it became what it was meant to be.